I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 5th, 2019 School Committee meeting. I'd like to open the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would feel like I'm doing too many of these. Open the meeting with a moment of silence. Dr. Marie Chesnick, 25-year speech and language pathologist at the middle school, passed away today. She just, 25 years, has impacted so many children, so many families, so many coworkers. Our hearts and our thoughts are with the family and friends at this time at such a sudden loss in their lives and our lives. And she'll just be terribly missed. And just knowing, though, that these teachers have touched so many children and positively influenced them, that gives just a little bit of peace, knowing that they are going on through all the children and families that they helped, and especially with Marie. So I'd like to have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Dr. Conti, will we stick with the order tonight? I'm sorry.
Probably not. So,
Okay.
because we have some folks here, so I'm trying to be sensitive to that. And just obviously, so Ways and Means knows this was an added meeting, so the focus tonight is really on sort of straight up budget. So that's really where we are. And again, we're going to have a first reading on the warrant articles. There's not a whole lot of backup. We have a lot of backup information, but we haven't prioritized yet. So this is really an introduction to the warrant articles, is really what it should read. So I think that'll come up. But I wanted to start with the budget items, because we have some folks here representing some of the budget areas. And so with that, the fiscal 20 budget, I think curriculum, health services, IT, library, maintenance, and custodial. So I'll turn it over to Nicole.
So, I don't know, like, which department we want to start with, go in this order, I guess. Okay. So curriculum's up first. Oh, yeah, she is. Yes, here.
I believe the first item or the first page for my department's budget is in-service training budget on page 31. And again, there's a increase of about 14% in the in-service training budget for the upcoming year from FY19. And again, you're going to hear this recurring theme in a few pages, but one of the reasons is the Imagine Learning ELL licenses and some other ELL assessments that we're using. And I think that's been an area that we've been underfunded in the past, and our ELL enrollment continues to rise to over 160 students district-wide, and that number has not increased historically. And I think the Newsella is the other one that I don't think hit the full FY19 budget. I think we were prorated last year, so that, because we picked it up after the year started, and the feedback's been very positive, and it's been widely used across the district. So that would be the other item that caused the bump in service / training, because of paying the full year for FY20 instead of just a partial year. If we go to page 33, that number is up 71%. Again, it's only a $14,000 increase. Again, it's a small number. When you say 71%, that raises eyebrows. But again, the areas that have impacted that for next year are the food for the BPS Con, the 3-day conference, was under budgeted last year at $5,000, and we've added $10,000 to that item to more accurately assess what it's going to cost us. And then the 504 needs is something that has not historically been listed in and it comes out of our office. If there's any needs for 504 assessments or any type of resources we need to buy for students on 504s, that's typically funded out of my office. So those are the two major increases there, as well as we do need a new copying machine, which you see as well. And then I know we had an increase on page 35. That's for our K1. It's our final year of implementation of the Keys to Literacy comprehension strategies, and that will cover that, the initial training for all of our K1 teachers, and at that point we'll be trained with Keys to Literacy comprehension in grades K through 12. So we've been gradually doing that over a number of years. And the last thing, I think there was one more ELL increase somewhere on page. Bum, bum. What page was it? There was one more number. I'm trying to, here it is, sorry.
43.
Page 43. Again, you see under supplies an increase of 151%, it says, for ELL education supplies. But that's, again, understanding we only spent $3,879 last year on ELL supplies, and we're looking to increase that to $9,750, which, again, if you want to look at our ELL population, basically works out to a little over $50 per student. Again, that's not the number we're spending on those students, but that's the number we're going to spend for additional ELL supplies for those students. So, again, that's a quick rundown of why there's any increases in anything that comes out of the Curriculum and Instruction Office for next year.
Thanks, Patrick. Ms. Creed, I just want to make sure, I emailed you the document that we prepared in August that sort of describes who we are as a district for students. I just want to make sure you received that.
We received it, and it's unbelievable. It's at 52 languages, the volume of people. I think, honestly, that should be included in the town meeting pad.
Okay.
To see who we're actually educating at this point.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yep.
So again, just to reiterate, there are some big percentage numbers, but they're not on monetary totals that were big numbers to begin with, so I just wanted to put that in context for you. And thanks to Nicole for the support on getting that together.
Other questions from the board on Ways and Means? Patrick, I just have one quick question. The DRA updated assessment kits, if available, are those on page 36? Or the Fontes and Pinnell? I didn't know if the DRA's been used for so long, if that was going out, or if it's more of a thought process of switching.
I know the kits are being updated, and I'm not sure if it was the timing, if we're going to have them in time to
Okay.
do the DRA assessments when we would typically do them. So I think it's more along that line, that they do update these things every so often, and I'm not sure if the updates are going to be available to us in a timely fashion, so I think it's more along that line.
Okay,
But I can double check and let you know if that's not accurate.
okay, thank you.
All right, Nicole, Health Services?
Yep.
And Barbara Conley, our nursing guru, is here. Hi, Barbara, thanks for coming out.
Hello.
Thank you for the invite, everybody.
Welcome.
Health Services is going to be on...
What page?
I'll get to it, hang on.
134, I think. I printed them. I
Yep,
couldn't.
thank you. Yeah, 134. I think it was.
I just couldn't do
Maybe
it.
it might be the
It
one
was
you
losing
just-
my mind.
Take that piece off. Yep.
No, I have it here. Oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah.
There we go. Go ahead.
I think I have it here, yeah.
Thank you very much for the invite, and I also want to thank Patrick for presenting last year. I couldn't attend because I was unfortunately ill. Thought I wouldn't share my germs, but, so Patrick last year presented a presentation on the Comprehensive School Health Manual explaining that nurse-to-student ratio should be 1 to 500 students. I'm here this evening to explain why that is what it is. It's a recommendation. Doesn't mean it has to be 1 to 500. It actually could be 2 to 500, depending on the medical needs of the students in the building. So what I wanted to do this evening is explain to you what nurses do, because a lot of people don't exactly know exactly what a nurse does. And from there, explain where they get the rationale for the number ratio, what data that we have for our district, and where I feel that we should lie. So the first slide is essentially just a definition from the National Association of School Nursing, what a nurse is. You read this, it's very comprehensive. A lot of people are like, well, what does this mean? So I'm going to skip this slide. It is there for you to review at your discretion. But essentially, a school nurse primary responsibilities is to prevent injury, triage students, and treat students for any medical needs that arise. Illness assessment and care, medication administration and monitoring, health counseling and health promotion, communication of disease prevention and control, individual health care plans of students that have any medical problem. They need an individual health care plan for that problem. Let's see, coordinate medical safety of all students for field trips, case management for students with special health care needs, communication with everyone in the building, education to everyone in the building. We are now presently the backup for the lab program, and we are the nurse for the lab program at the high school. And also next year, we will be doing Medicaid billing. I am working presently with Mary Hood, the special ed director, and we are going to get this up and rolling for next year so we can bring some revenue in for the town. Any questions so far? Okay. Additionally, nurses are also responsible for being an IEP consultant, the medical 504 coordinator, education to parents of students about their medications, policies, and illnesses, physician consults for medical, social, behavioral, and emotional issues, assist for the after-school program, the Sprouts program, and the athletic department for any medication administration and medical safety issues. And the red stars mean that these are new things that we've had to implement, okay? Education to staff regarding EpiPen auto-injector administration, life-threatening allergies, blood-borne pathogens, students with special medical conditions, immunizations, policies, communicable diseases, general health and wellness, and about medication and the impact upon the students' performance in school. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's a big job. In addition to all those duties on a daily basis, we are mandated by the state of Massachusetts to do vision, hearing, postural screening, height, weight, BMI, and SBIRT. This is over 8,000 screenings, and we have to do data entry for every single screen and report this to the state, in addition to our daily functions. So if you look at the data that we have in our district, we have 268 students with food allergies, with 6 students with bee allergies, 2 with latex allergies, 9 students with diabetes, Neurological deficits, we have 33, 348 students with asthma. We have 16 students with blood disorders that may need infusions during the school day, where a home health nurse will come in and service the student in the nurse's office. And then we also have an increase of behavioral emotional conditions, ADHD and ADD, 116, autism, 51, and anxiety, 37. Again, we are also the backup service for the lab program, which has a very high level of medical needs. So let's look at the number of students we have in each school. So BECC, this is the number of visits for each school for last year. I don't have the data for this year because it has to complete for the year. Last year, the preschool saw about 500 students. Fox Hill saw 3,164 students that year. Francis Wyman, 6,892. Memorial, 4,123. Pine Glen, 2,476. Marshall Simons had almost 4,000, and the high school almost 5,000. And that totaled almost 26,000 visits in the nurse's office. That's a lot of visits. So if you compare just the fall of last year to this year, we have had an increase of 12% of services obtained in the nurse's office. So from September to November of last year, we saw 9,284 students. This year, it was 10,352. So the medical needs are getting bigger and more complex. So in additional, we need system support, which is full-time FTE coverage that helps us with sick calls, personal days. Just alone of people, all my 10 nurses take their personal days allotted to them. That's 30 days right there. Medical leaves, professional development, bereavement, field trips. We had 130 field trips last year. 130. And IEPs, 504 meetings we cover, screenings, expert vision and hearing, BMI, posturals, 90 days we needed to have in full-time coverage to implement those screenings that we need to do, that we're actually mandated to do. New student enrollment and lunches, planning time, support groups, increased education in the classroom, et cetera. It's very critical to have reliable staff to cover for safe care. So where does the state get this number? How did they come up with 1 to 500? They look at the number of students enrolled. They look at the number of medically fragile students and the increase of special education staying in the district. The number of students with developmental communication needs, number of nursing office visits, the number of procedures, treatments, medical administrations, and also what is the expectation of the role in the nurse in the district. So when you pull that all together, that's where, in 1998, they came up with this number. This was 20 years ago. They want 1 nurse to 500. If it goes over that, they have a ratio of what they want you to follow. Burlington presently has 10. We did have 11, but we had a resignation over the summer, and because of the budget, we ended up going back down to 10. To meet that standard of 1 to 500, we need 13 nurses. So where are we short? At Francis Wyman, we have 598 students with a lot of special ed students over in that school. We presently have 1, we need 2. At Marshall Simons Middle School, we have 788 students, we have 1 nurse, we need 2. At the high school, we have 993 students, we have 1, we need 2. So does everybody understand where I'm getting the request of the 3 nursing increase? So my professional opinion is to follow the recommendations of the state. What other districts are following this? Just locally, just around us is Lexington and Wilmington. The Department of Public Health guidelines will be updated in either 2019 or 2020. Their recommendation is to change from workload to caseload. So they're looking at some way of trying to figure out, if you have a caseload of 100 students, you actually may require 2 nurses, not just 1. So it's not just a number game, it's a acuity game. Does everybody understand that? So the nursing department was cut last year, and that is the reason why I'm asking for 3 nurses and not 2 this year. We actually fell back to what we were the present year before that. So I did give Sharon Gilbert a document to share with you. It is the certificate of registration to administer auto-injection epinephrine to students by staff members that are legally trained. In this document was only approved for 1 year. It is typically approved for 2 years. Attached to the approval was a letter from the state. It was addressed to Dr. Conti, and I was CC'd on it, stating that we are below our safety margins for nursing staff ratios, and they will only grant us 1 year to allow us to train. Now, what I'm being told in my nurse leader meetings is that they're going to enforce it next year. We will get notified with a probation letter. This probation letter will give us 90 days to fix the ratios for them to allow us to do this. Their philosophy is if you don't have the appropriate staffing, then you don't have the time to train. And training is education, and then the staff member has to come in and take a written test, then they have to demonstrate it. So when they go on a field trip, they're given the child's individual health care plan that tells them exactly what they can do for this child, when to do it, and the only med that we can delegate is an auto-injector EpiPen to our staff members. So my fear is that we don't meet the staff ratio, that we're gonna be put on a probation, and then we're gonna have 90 days to fix it. Now, we did get this letter 2 years ago, and we did increase our staffing by 1. I did not change that paperwork with the state because what we did was we took a resource to fill that position, but then that second nurse for the high school that was hired, I kept her there, but we pull her where it's needed, which has really been very stressful on the support system of our department. When we get a sick call, I'm very lucky. I have very reliable subs, only 2 of them, but very good, reliable subs. They've been very good about covering. But if I didn't have them, I don't know what I would have done this year. So if we do not get this registration, this is the repercussion to our district. The nursing department cannot delegate EpiPen to anybody. This means that every field trip would need a nurse. This means that the Sprouts program before and after school, because presently our nurse at Francis Wyman is covering the medical care of those students during the day, we would have to have a nurse. If we don't get this delegation, before and after school, we'll have to have a nurse on the premises at every time at every school. The athletic events would have to have a nurse because we can't delegate the EpiPen to the coaches, to the athletic trainers, and so forth. Intramural programs, school clubs, drama, band. We would have to have a nurse for all these programs. School dances, activities, events in the evenings, any after-school or weekend event. So this is the situation that we're in. My recommendation is to meet it. I think it would help us to meet all the students' needs a little bit easier. And it's all about the kids, and this is for the kids. So that's my recommendation. Does anybody have any questions?
Comments? Mrs. Monco?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
So your recommendation is that in order to not have this waiver problem, where we can instruct staff members to use EpiPens, that we need to have the right number of nurses. And to have the
Correct.
right number of nurses, we need to hire 3.
Correct. According to the staffing that I presently have right now, I need 3 more nurses.
And that would fulfill the obligation
Correct.
that is giving us
Correct.
the
Right.
difficulty. Okay.
I will be honest with you. We got the letter 2 years ago. We increased by a nurse. They gave us another year. So I think that they're reasonable. I think that if they see you progressing in the direction and that you are increasing your staffing, I think they understand that there's budgets. So I think that if we go up to presently, according to their paperwork, they think we have 11.
Right.
We really have 10. If I resubmit and say that I have 10, they're definitely not going to give it to us.
Yeah, I hear you.
If I do 11, I think they're gonna give us a probation. If I do 12, I think they're gonna grant us another year with the expectation to get to 13 the following year. So it's kind of really up to you guys on how you wanna handle this. Do we wanna be proactive, bite the bullet and do it now? Do we want to do it progressively? I just think it's in the best interest of the students overall. I think the medical complexity of the students is getting bigger. I think special ed is getting bigger. We're keeping kids in district, which is justifiable. They should be coming to public schools. But everybody sees the impact on the classrooms, but they're not seeing the impact on the nursing offices and what that involves. And every child that has a respiratory condition has an individual healthcare plan. So if you add all those medical conditions up, we have probably about 2,000 individual healthcare plans in our nurse's office to give appropriate medical services to these students. So this is why we need the support to get the staffing.
Well, thank you for being on top of the details and bringing it to us.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
My
that.
pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Anyone?
Oh.
they might
any
have
other
questions?
A couple more.
Yes.
I just want to
Simon.
follow up on Mrs. Monaco's question about, I was a former teacher too, so if we have enough teachers trained, I couldn't tell if you were saying we always need a nurse, or we don't need a nurse, or do we not have enough, are you saying that we don't have enough nurses to train enough teachers, so we don't, sometimes a teacher could go on a field trip if they're trained, is that what you're saying?
Correct. So
Okay.
what the state is saying, and they said it very clearly in the letter,
Yeah.
that they don't feel that our ratios are high enough to be able to give that nurse enough time to adequately train the staff. So if we don't increase our staffing, they're not going to give us this registration. So
But
presently-
because they won't have enough time to train enough teachers, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Can
Yeah.
I interject?
Yeah.
May
Yep.
I, please? Thank you. I think the state, again, no offense, we could obviously train our teachers during BPS Con and have, if we wanted, if that was the priority. I'm not saying that we have to do that, but
Right.
the state's making a judgment call that we wouldn't be able to get this training done. If it was just when kids in school and the nurses are busy with kids, if that was the only time we could train teachers, I would probably agree with them. But I would argue with them, and I'm not saying we're not going to go for the number of nurses we need, but basically they're saying that they're going to, hold this delegation out if we don't meet their, what they judge to be the right allocation of nurses per students. So that's, just to sum it up, so.
Which I agree with Mr. Larkin. We are presently doing it. But their viewpoint, that's what they put in the letter, is that we don't feel that you have enough nursing staff to be able to appropriately and safely train this many people to be able to handle this situation.
Is that
So-
excuse me, if I could ask a follow-up question?
Oh, sure.
So does the letter say that that's the area where we don't have enough nurses? Or is it, we don't have enough nurses because of all the things that you put together?
Because of all the things.
Oh,
But
okay.
that's the primary thing
That was
why
a
we got
primary
this,
letter.
only got a 1-year
Okay.
certification. It's usually 2 years that I have to reapply for it,
Okay.
but we only got a 1 year, and
Okay.
that was their rationale in the letter, is that we just don't have appropriate staffing, and because of that, they don't feel that we have enough time to appropriately train
Okay.
unlicensed staff to be able to safely administer this.
And I also want to
So,
thank you for all the
yeah.
research and
Oh, absolutely,
preparation, because this was very
absolutely.
informative, so thank you for that.
It's really hard, because a lot of people don't understand what a school nurse does. You know, I'm out in the public, and they think it's just giving Band-Aids, and obviously, truly, it's not. It's more than that. We are so involved with every child that's in every building, so, and we really want to meet every child's need. So, any other questions?
Ms. Marcus?
If I may. Leaving the certification aside, let's just say that that wasn't even part of this. If we did not have 13 nurses, what would the impact be in terms of service when it comes to field trips and, other things that we do?
My professional opinion?
That's what we're here for.
I think it's been very challenging, to be honest with you. If we lose, first of all, if we lose this delegation, Like, I just don't know what we're gonna do, first of all. But I really think not only does the staff ratio affect this, but I think it really affects the capability of the nurse meeting all the children's needs, especially now that we're keeping all these students in district, the growth of the number of students with diabetes in our district, which in my opinion, I think 3 diabetics in one building alone requires a nurse, never mind the staff ratio. But that's just my professional opinion. I think if you asked any other nurse leader in another district, they would agree, only because they run the department and they see the complexity of what's coming through the door. And I think that more nursing staffing would also increase time on study for the students. It's less wait time in the nurse's office. You get them back in, and that's the goal of school, is to educate them. They're not going to learn if they're in the nurse's office waiting in line to be seen. And our nurses are fantastic. I'm so very proud of all of them. They work very hard day in and day out. They never complain. They don't get lunches, and not once have they ever grieved about it, because they understand that that's part of the job, and they're here for the kids, and that is part of the job. But I truly do believe that we need 13 nurses in our district, so.
I also have a question about the field trips.
Yes.
Is the 130 the number of field trips that the district gives, or the 130 the number of field trips that require a nurse?
130 field trips booked through the district. I actually don't have the number for how many that needed a nurse to go.
Okay, so that
So-
number is a little.
Exactly.
That's
So-
not an accurate,
so
how
when-
many trips
Right.
need a nurse.
Exactly.
Okay,
So-
and I'm sure it's a lot, but I
Yep.
just wanted to clarify
So
that
when those
number.
field trips come across, the nurse has to
Yep,
evaluate
check 'em.
who's going on the trip.
Yep,
So according to who's going on the trip, then she needs to determine if a nurse is
Yes.
required or not, based on staffing. You can't
Yes.
force staff to be delegated EpiPens.
yeah,
We
okay,
are required to train them, but we can't force them to be delegated in that
Okay.
next step, because
Okay.
some people don't feel they'd be capable of doing that.
okay, thank you.
So, but
Yeah.
that's where that comes. Anything else?
I want to thank you very much for your presentation. There's so much information that I don't think the community is aware of, just what's happening. And also the information of the students getting back to class, because at any point, there's 2, 3, 4 students. And I feel like sometimes the nurse just is just trying to move through the kids, and a lot of times the students need more than that. They need to really be assessed, and, you know, sometimes I question, do you have enough time as a nurse to do that when you
Right.
have 3 students sitting
Right.
there in front of you, and different activities going on? And without fail, whenever the nurse is on lunch, that's when one of my students wipes out or has the
Absolutely.
headache. So, thank you for the information,
welcome.
just putting it all together so we can see that airplane view, looking down, of what your
Great.
day involves. Oh, Mr. Eiler?
Yes.
Yeah, just want to make sure I understand it on the potential new position sheet here. There's one position requested for a nurse. Is that to get us from 10 to 11? Or,
Yeah, I was going to 10 to 11, and I think we had some floating nurses as well, so we're going to work on the number and the recommendation.
great, thanks.
And then I just had a quick budget question. So on the first page, it lists 9 nurses, but then I'm assuming the 10th nurse would be the supervisor, the nurse, no.
So 9, the nursing supervisor, and then there's one on the accommodated side
Oh, okay,
for BUCC.
okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Seeing
All right,
none?
thank you, Madam Chair. We're going to move on to IT. So we have Jose D'Souza here, our Director of Technology. Jose, thanks for coming out.
Good evening, thanks for having me. Okay, ready.
What page are we on?
So,
Thank you.
I guess everybody has a copy. of the items that we have in our department. As you will see, we have contracted services, materials and supplies, and equipment. In the last two items, we haven't changed the numbers from last year. However, on the first one, which is contracted services, we are requesting.
109.
109.
Thank you. On the first item, contracted services, we are requesting for an increase on 6.67%. I guess there are questions about that, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes, it is 6.67 on that item, but over the total is 3.73. And the increase is due for mostly repairs of devices that the students have from K to 8th grade, which is an item that we didn't have before.
Can I just ask where that, because I assume we've been repairing things for the students, where it was prior in this budget?
Do you want me to answer the question?
Sure.
That used to come from the technology revolving account.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And again, Jose, just looking at the numbers here, the 6.67% is a $17,000 increase.
That is
So-
correct.
So you did have money for the repairs for these devices, it just wasn't sufficient. Is that what we're saying? So you're looking for a 17%, a $17,000 increase, is that the difference?
Yes, there is more, it's not just for repairing, there is another item over here, which is, $5,000 is for the VPP program, which is volume, purchase program, which is software that we put on the devices.
Okay,
That's what adds to 17,000.
all right,
Can I just add something?
please.
So previously, these expenses, as Jose mentioned, came from the IT revolving fund, which, so when we sell like the iPads back to the students or the company, that's where those funds go into that account. We had changed our lease last year for the number of iPads that we were purchasing. So to help offset that cost, we were putting, I guess, a little bit more strain on that revolving fund. So that's why you see the shift here from using that revolving fund into the operating budget now.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Eiler.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just want to understand there's two different revolving funds. There's the iPad account and there's the IT tech account. And I was just trying to understand, where do they fit into this versus this new, or this additional amount? Is it appropriate to be using those revolving funds for this, or if not, what are those used for?
Oh,
Through
sorry,
the chair.
yes, I was getting on my paper, look, sorry.
So the IT, get the names of them. The IT tech account is for conferences and other like events related to, well, mostly technology related. And those are the expenses that flow through there. And then for the iPad account, that's where, with the buyback program, the funds are deposited into that account. And then appropriate expenses for that account would be purchasing or repairs of iPads.
So if the iPad account looks like it's increasing in value, why is that not an appropriate way to be funding iPad repairs? Or is it?
No, it is appropriate, just where we were increasing the lease for the purchase of the iPads and offsetting the cost using this account. We didn't want to continue to put so much demand on this account that it couldn't sustain it.
Okay, I mean, it has $90,000 in it. Is it in danger of running out, or?
Yeah, we're buying more iPads, I think we need more iPads, we have more kids, we're expanding the lease. So I think that's, again, my understanding is that's really where we wanted to put them put the money from selling back the iPads back into the iPad lease is sort of our primary function. And I guess that's we're offsetting what that increase is with additional money in the operating budget for the repairs. Again, the change, if we take out the $5,000 for the VPP, it was only a $12,000 increase for those repairs. So we're still relying on the revolving account to offset some of those costs. But we also need to buy more devices because we have more kids.
And just to put that in perspective, I think the increase of the lease last year was about 30,000. So while you see that there's 90,000 in there, that can be gone in 2-3 years. so.
2 years, right?
Ms. Simon, then, sorry.
So it could be gone in 2 or 3 years if there's no additional income into that revolving account. So why is there income now and there wouldn't be in the future?
No, that there would be still in the future, but if we continue to incur so many expenses for the 30,000, then all of the repairs, it's not sustainable for the costs and the revenue that account.
So it
sees.
just, the income and the expenditures just aren't sustainable if we continue to support the repairs. And so we've now tried to put that expense into the operating budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Some of that expense.
Some,
Again,
yep,
there's-
some,
We're
okay.
basically don't want to overtax the revolving account to get ourselves in trouble. If we wait 2 or 3 years, then the increase in the operating budget may be much more significant than $12,000. So we're just trying to gradually look at the number of devices we're buying, the number of repairs we have, and I think this was a smart way to go about sort of looking at that balance between revolving account and what we need for repairs.
Ms. Creighton?
If I remember correctly, Nicole, didn't we cut part of the budget for the iPad expense anyways? Like, didn't we have to take money out of the revolving account last year to offset?
That was for the increased cost of the lease, yeah. That was the 30,000 that I was referring to.
So, I mean, to me, it makes sense to increase it into the operating budgets, just in case we have that increase. Jose, can you tell me, because I'm not really clear, what type of devices are these kids using? And can you also tell me at what grades they start taking them home? Or are they just stored at the school? And tell me what we're using nowadays.
May I say the brand? Yeah, from K to 11, we're using iPads. All the students from middle school keep it in the school, so do the ones in the elementary. It's only the ones in high school that take it home. However, we are covering on repairs the devices that are within from K to 8th grade, which are kept over here. Just because they are kept over here doesn't mean that they don't break it. They actually do. Now, the students from a high school, they are supposed to get their own insurance for repairs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Monco?
So, if I understand correctly, we took $30,000 out of this revolving account that currently has 90 for the increase in iPad leases for the current year, did it last year, for the current year. Do you expect to take another chunk this year for next year?
I think so.
Yeah, the cost of the lease isn't going down, so we would still be offsetting, yes.
Will it still be 30, or is it likely to be more than 30?
I believe it's still the same.
Still the
Within
same?
a few thousand, yes.
And as far as Martha was asking, money that comes into this account, do you expect the same typical revenue, or do you expect it to go down for some reason?
I'll jump in for a quick second. So, sorry, I don't have the history in front of me, but we do see a cycle about every 3 years, depending on the value of a device. When Apple, for example, since we have iPads, comes out with a new generation device, then what happens is that year, the current device that we're traded in, the value decreases. Then, once we have the newer series, we'll see a higher increase. So when we were trading in, I don't want to say the newer, older of the newer ones, so we got a higher value this year, which put us, not a spike, but a higher deposit into that revolving account. But in typical years, we've seen iPads that get $15, $20 trade-ins, just because they're 4 or 5 years old and they're the previous generation.
So has the value, the 90,000 that's in there, has that been building over a lot of years?
It's been kind of sitting, and it does fluctuate up and down a little bit. So again, we can only use that for iPad. So if we're taking money in either from a trade-in on iPad or selling iPads to students, we have other devices in the district as well too, that need repair. So of course we have Chromebooks, we have laptops and so forth. So we try to cover those in our other budget.
Okay.
So again, this is strictly really just for iPads. So that other request really is just to help us additionally with any equipment that we need in the district for repairs.
And the additional request in the budget is for an addition of 17,000?
The request is two-part. It's 12,000 for repairs and then 5,000 for VPP, which is Volume Purchase Program, which is the apps we
Okay.
put on the iPad.
Okay, thank you. I think Dennis wants to speak.
How are you? I
Yes.
just wanted to mention one thing about the projections for the revolving account and some of the buyback that's happened. We do project that that is going to go down. One of the grades at the high school went to the Chromebook year. We don't expect to see a return. I would not expect to see much of a return for that year. So you would see the potential for that to decrease because of that. So as you look out 3 years from now, you will see likely a decrease in what's available in that because of the change in the device for that school year. They just don't have the same value.
Thank you. Good point.
Any other questions? No? Thank you. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jose, thank you.
So next up, we have library, and that begins on page 113.
113, and it's library. And we are joined by Dennis Villano. Dennis, thanks for coming out.
Sure. I'm here for a couple of things tonight. Shereen and I are going to speak a little bit about computer science later. For the library portion, there was no change for this year. We wanted to make sure that it was serving the purposes of the libraries, but there wasn't necessarily a greater need. A couple of years ago, we did change how the money was being spent. It is, if you look at our Learning Commons model, our libraries, we're spending money differently. We may not be buying as many traditional books as we were. We're buying more databases, online subscriptions. And also now we're starting to see school libraries purchase a lot of the maker things, the things that kids are creating in their schools. They're going into the library for activities beyond just checking out books. But we have been able to keep things where they've been for the past couple of years. There was no increase or request of an increase. I do think there is potential for that to be a greater need in coming years. As we're seeing, like I said, some of these databases are starting to go up. They do go up year to year, and then we are seeing more of the activities in the library be more than just reading, checking out books, and regular circulation. So there is a potential need for that over time. Our libraries have really supported the computer science movement, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes as well. So we'd like to see that come from somewhere else over time. But for this year, as Fadine and I worked out, there wasn't any increase or request for additional funding.
Again, thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
It's a little off topic, but when I shake my Etch-a-Sketch, Dennis, it doesn't disappear from the screen. You'll take a look at that later
Sure.
on.
Technology, not library department.
We all work together.
Ms. Simon?
So I'm looking on page 115, and obviously there's a bigger context, but I'm only looking at one at a time. And we have an increase in library materials and supplies across the district. Which, I mean, is it just everything gets more expensive every year?
So
Is that
there
what that
actually,
is?
it isn't actually an increase of the overall amount. What Nicole and Fadine and I did was we looked at what we were spending from each area, and we worked out where the money was actually being spent. It may not have been under, a purchase may not have really fit a supply purchase before. It may have been something else, but we wanted to work out where it really should fit within the budget.
So that additional request there came from another part of the library budget?
Yeah, it's actually the same
Okay.
total. Nothing has changed in the total
Okay.
expenditure. It's just
And-
been, we've just reorganized where it's coming.
Okay, and that was the total budget number on that other slide that was green, okay.
Yeah, if you look at the top,
I see.
contracted services is down 10,000, and material
Yep.
supplies is up 6, and textbooks and related are up 4.
So
it
it's
all
a
balanced out,
0%
yeah.
for your
Yes.
library budget, okay, thank you.
And the resources at the library are getting so much more complex, where it just used to be an online subscription, but now with the subscription comes curricula, right, comes assessment, comes dashboard, so it's really, the tools are getting so much more complex, and I need to explain the Etch-a-Sketch joke just for our Ways and Means Subcommittee members. When we first distributed iPads to the school committee, we did not trust Mr. Murphy with any technology. So he was given an Etch-a-Sketch for a year first, just to make sure that he could hold the device and not break anything, so.
Training
that-
wheels.
Yes, that was a training wheel, so we worked up from an Etch-a-Sketch to the current iPad that he has. So that was the Etch-a-Sketch reference, and that Etch-a-Sketch was delivered by Mr. Villano, so thank you.
But he still shakes it,
Yes,
Dennis.
yeah. You'd be able to do that with some of the apps, but I'm glad he's moved up. He's doing a good job with the iPad now, so.
Progress.
Seeing nothing else, thank you very much.
Okay, and Dennis, you're right back, right, so maintenance custodial, you want to do both at once, or separate, or
Sure.
what pages you want to know?
148,
148 was the.
system-wide maintenance. So again, similar to the last presentation, I mean, you'll see that there's a 1% increase. Really, system-wide maintenance contracted services has been reorganized. There is a $5,000 increase, but again, either due to projects and in contracts that we have in place and so forth, for the $500,000, less than a 1% increase on the contracts over a year is actually pretty good, in my opinion. Also, when you look at the supplies, same exact thing. I mean, it's a $1,000 increase in the supplies over last year's budget, and again, an overall 1% increase. I would say is very minimal considering the amount of work that does happen here in the district with the maintenance department. I think you'll see some of the warrant articles coming up in a few minutes, which will have a bigger impact on asking for money. So if you want to jump right in, or if you want questions first on the custodian one, but the same exact thing really on that one is $5,000 increase from last year on the custodian supplies. And that's really just cleaning supplies, scrubbing pads and so forth. And again, in 1 year for some prices to change a little bit in different supplies, $5,000 increase. And that's for all 6 schools district-wide.
Mr. Nelson?
I have a question, Tom? I have a quick one.
Yep, Mr. Nelson?
Bob, is there a figure built in here somewhere for an allotment for each school for capital, or, improvements that they need?
For capital improvements?
Well, not capital, but I mean, in the past, we've seen in the operating or the maintenance budget, each school would get a certain amount of money for repairs and improvements and things of that nature. Are we
So-
doing that this year in this budget?
On page 149, we allotted about 30,000 in total for like projects and certain things to be
That
determined.
was my question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just had a quick
Yes.
question for Bob,
Yep.
too, on the maintenance stuff, and I should know this, and I think I know the answer, but for some of the contracted services, those are multi-year arrangements for, like a new boiler gets installed, there'd be a multi-year maintenance agreement with the company we purchased the boiler from or something like that. So when you're putting this together, it would be, some of the figures here is what I'm saying are part of multi-year agreements that are already in place.
So correct. Mostly our annual maintenances, But there are some, so like you said, if we were to buy a new boiler, yes, that would come with a maintenance agreement. If we were to install some new equipment somewhere, let's say Memorial, that would have a service contract on it. So Marshall Simons has a contract on it with the software and the hardware that we have for the HVAC and heating system. That is a multi-year system. Mostly everything else here is annual maintenance. When it gets to bleacher maintenance, fire alarm testing, elevator testing and so forth, a lot of those are required, mandatory that we have to do every single year, but those aren't really contract-based year to year. I'm sorry, those aren't multi-year contracts, those are year-to-year contracts. Sorry.
Other questions? Ms. Graydon?
Can you talk to us about the miscellaneous repairs for the 209,000, bleachers, roof, signs? Is that something that we normally see in the budget?
This is what, on page 149?
149, yeah.
So basically, we pulled like some historical data to see on average how much we spend on those miscellaneous repairs. And that's the number you see there, but we don't know if it's gonna be, you know, a hole in the roof or something else, so.
Okay, so it's not necessarily those particular items, but that's kind of what it's been historically?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, so just to follow up on that. So if it's not particularly tied to the items listed here on miscellaneous repairs, then why is the $30,000 from miscellaneous building repairs separate from that? Why wouldn't you just have one line item for all miscellaneous repairs?
So
We can make it one line. if
we,
you
we,
want.
we can, but that was basically so we could tell the department or the school that it was going to happen this year.
Okay.
So that's really the answer. If you want it as one item, we could.
No, I mean, I have no preference.
Think-
Yeah, like if they wanted new blinds or.
Nick, just, we've always put some money also aside, and that's the $30,000 for principal discretion too. So if a classroom needs new blinds was an example that we used, that's not the hole in the wall that we're fixing, so we sort of make that, that difference. And sometimes a little investment in the building, like a capital expense by a principal, can make a big difference. And the maintenance staff don't really look through the same eyes as the principal does, so we just like to have a little bit of latitude for the principal to, again, it's not a huge amount of money, obviously, across 6 schools, but there might be something that they can do. Honestly, a new entry mat when you come in might make a big difference in terms of mud in the school or floors or something like that. And so that's really, I think, one of the distinctions I make in my head.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. So I think that would take care of the FY20 budget for tonight. Okay. And where would you like to head next? Oh,
Actually, while we have Rich here, why don't we do the bus stuff, and then we'll do warrants? Because hopefully we won't go too into detail. So I'm going to introduce Bob. Bob can take this in a second, but we wanted to share the request for proposals on the transportation contract. I think from our earliest meetings, we said that we were going to sort of separate out the increase in the transportation contract. We've done a 5-year contract arrangement with our bus company that is concluding this year. I'm not sure we've shared the request for proposals with the committee before,
No.
but I think we committed to sort of doing this. We hired a consultant this year to look at some of our practices, efficiencies, and so we just wanted to give an update on where we are in the process. wanted to share, again, the proposal, talk about some timelines. Again, we have no answers tonight, but we wanted to give an update and give an opportunity for the committee and obviously Ways and Means to ask any questions or to make any comments in the process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
I got nothing left to say after that. No, I'm sorry. So again, as Eric mentioned, previously, we were in a 3-year contract with a 2-year extension for the buses. That does expire this year, June 30th. We know that not only is this a high-ticket item, but this is also something that my office gets calls on, school committee gets calls on, and this is a safety concern as well, too. We need to make sure our kids get to school in a safe bus and safe conditions at a reasonable price. I'm going to introduce Mr. Labrie, Rich Labrie, in a second to come up here. We knew that because of the high dollar value of this, also with conversations with the town and Nicole as well, too, that having some outside help with experience would be great for us. So again, if Mr. Labrie could come up here for a second, please, we'll introduce him. I think he will tell you that he has 20-plus years experience in the transportation field. Right now, where we're at is he's a consultant. So he is looking at our existing contract, helping us build the draft specs for the new bid. Let's be clear. We, as Burlington, are responsible for the bid that goes out. So we are taking his guidance, but as either a committee and or a team here, we will have to have the final say before the bid goes out. What you see in front of you, like I said, is a draft. There are some draft dates in there. There's some draft language in there. And obviously, we'd be seeking some feedback on that. So like I said, thank you, Rich, for being here tonight. And please introduce yourself to the committee.
Well, thank you.
Hello.
Ms. Hine?
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Rich Labrie. I'm a former collaborative director in Massachusetts, formerly director of the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative for 7 school districts around Springfield. We were the largest and most multi-purpose of the collaboratives in the state. We did more different types of things for our school districts than most collaboratives do. Among things, we did a lot of school construction, school renovations. We also did school transportation. And about 35 years ago, over a 7-year period, we took over all of the school transportation for our 7 school districts, including yellow buses as well as special ed transportation. We set up a multi-district routing and scheduling and cost-sharing program that became the state model, and other collaboratives followed in our suit and moved forward with the same type of model because, one, it was high quality, and secondly, it was very cost effective. And over the course of those 5 to 7 years, as we took over private contracts, we got to learn a lot about the school transportation business. Some of it by experience, some of it not so by experience, but we learned nonetheless. We were evaluated twice by the state, once by the Pioneer Institute and once by UMass Boston. They both found basically the same thing. They found that we were about 24% cheaper than contracting, and that the level of service was of the highest quality. And so, as I said, we became the state model. I retired 11 years ago. I started doing some consulting, a lot of it in the transportation area. I do transportation efficiency studies, and I do transportation bidding, among other things. And as I look at your school district, I put together a draft of a set of bid specifications, which I think are appropriate for Burlington. And I will say that they're somewhat, in some areas, a little different than what you've seen in the past. And I'm here to, at least to explain to you the differences, and especially the difference in strategy with regard to bidding. First, my recommendation is that we look at a straight 5-year contract. The reason being is that if you're going to solicit competition for what is a relatively small contract, you need to allow new people or even your current contractor to amortize their fixed cost and their capital cost over 5 years as opposed to over 3. If you do a 3+2 or a 3+1+1, they're not guaranteed the option years, and so they'll build their capital cost over the 3. And so you want to try to minimize your first year cost. Secondly, if you allow the contractors to tell you what their cost is going to be each year over 5 years, they typically build in somewhere between 4 and 5% increases per year. I've recommended, and this strategy has worked relatively well in the last 8, 9 years, is that we award on the basis of the first year only, and we do a cost of living increase on the contract from year to year based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And that roughly averaged about 1.5%, 1.56% over the last couple of years. Secondly, I recommend that we put in a fuel escalator, de-escalator clause to help the contractors cover the cost of increased fuel if fuel starts to go up dramatically, as it did 10 years ago. And what contractors found years ago is that when fuel went up to $5 and $6 a gallon, I mean, we all remember that, they didn't have it in their budget to absorb the cost, and what they did is they made it up on the next contract. And so what I'm saying between the COLA increase and the fuel escalation, de-escalation, is the school committee is going to share the risk with the contractor. And what that does is that the contractor doesn't have to forecast what he thinks the worst case scenario would be 5 years from now and build it into his cost on day one. What happens then is that you're paying for that worst case scenario even if it doesn't happen. And this way you're sharing the risk and you have a cost from year to year that is reasonable. Having said that, I'd like to say to you that I'm looking to help you to save money in transportation. But having looked at the cost of transportation in this district compared to what I've seen bid in the last 2 years, the 35 districts that have gone to bid in this area in the last 2 years, you're the lowest cost per day per bus now. And I'd like to say we're going to save money. I think the goal here is to minimize the increase as opposed to looking for a decrease in transportation costs. So again, there are some things with regard to insurance that I recommend, one of which is coverage for both uninsured and underinsured motorists. And the reason being is that over the last decade, there were more people driving around underinsured and uninsured than there have been in the past. You want to protect the school district and the municipality from any damages. While you may be indemnified by your bus contractor, lawyers will find a way to get to the deep pockets in the event of a catastrophic bus accident. You want to have that protection, as well as having a sufficient excess or umbrella insurance coverage. Those are the highlights of the changes from the strategy that you've used in the past. The template itself I've developed over 10 years. It's withstood the test of time. It's withstood challenges in the Inspector General's office and the Attorney General's office by unhappy contractors, some of whom were low bid and not necessarily some who were not low bid. And so, not that it's perfect, but we found that it's a pretty good starting place, to both quantify and qualify the needs of the district. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Does anyone have questions? All right,
More of
Mr.
a comment, I
Nelson?
guess, than questions. It's always nice to have another pair of eyes looking at what we're doing. And a professional like yourself, Mr. Labrie, I think it's refreshing to hear that you've looked at what we're doing, you've looked at the current provider that we have, and you've made recommendations, I think, that make a lot of sense. They're going to build in, hopefully, cost savings in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I think it's nice not to have to do this every 3 years, too, as well. So I like your recommendations. I like the idea of a 5-year contract versus a 3+2 or 3+1 and 1. And building in a COLA, I think, is a great idea. So thank you for your input on this. I think it's very helpful for us as a committee to know that you've had a chance to look at what we're doing. I think that the current contractor we've had over the years has been very competitive, obviously. He's done a pretty good job. And but who knows what's going to happen when we put this one out to bid. So I like your ideas, and I think they're going to help us.
I will tell you that there have been several things that have happened over the last 2 years with regard to the state that are going to impact the cost of transportation on this bid. And not only this bid, but all of the bids that are going out both this year and in the future. Not least of which was the state mandated Family Medical and Leave Act for part-time employees. The other is contributions to mass health by part-time employees and employers with part-time people. And the other is paid sick leave for part-time employees. And when you roll all those in to part-time people, bus drivers in particular, it balloons the cost of both the cost of wages and the cost of benefits. And in your case, you are covered by the state prevailing wage, which in itself had a built-in increase.
Yeah.
So those are the factors. The other big factor is whether the current contractor or a new contractor coming in will have to buy new buses to service this district. That in itself will be a large increase also on a cost per day per bus.
Follow-up
Mr.
question.
Nelson?
This particular bid document you're recommending, what are the requirements for the buses that have to be provided?
Bus during the term of the contract, no older than 10 years, no more than 150,000 miles.
Okay.
So if he has an 8-year-old bus now, he can start the contract, but 3 years into the contract, he would be required to replace it with a newer bus. Yeah.
Mr. Murphy?
Again, just to follow up a little bit in the comments, one of the concerns that were raised during the budget guideline meetings was that we look into the bus contract a little bit more because we knew it was coming up for renewal and was a relatively big ticket item in our budget. Based on what you're telling us, I think we can at least now go back to the town side as we further those discussions with evidence that we've had a pretty good contract from the sound of it, competitively speaking, over these past several years. So, while it's obviously a good idea to, as Steve said, have another set of eyes look at it to see if there's ways that we can do better, I think it sounds like we've done pretty well so far, and hopefully we can continue. But along those lines, there was an agreement made at the time that we set the guidelines, because the bus contract won't be decided until sometime in the summer, after our budget will have been presented and voted, that the increase of in the bus component of our budget will be taken outside of our guidelines. So I just wanted to remind people of that as we move forward. As we've been talking about this budget now for the past few weeks, in moving forward, it's obviously tight, and I think everybody agrees with that. And whatever happens with the bus increase, and there's bound to be an increase of some sort, will be exempt from factoring into our guidelines. So I think we have to just keep that in mind. Hopefully we can remain competitive in our bids, and but whatever that number happens to be, it's going to be outside of the guidelines. And the only other, you mentioned, talk about the insurance, that the lawyers will find deep pockets. They only do that in a compassionate and in a caring way. So I just want to frame the context of that. We all have work to do. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Mrs. Vanka?
I thought he was going to tell you the lawyers' kids had to eat, too.
That's true, too.
I just want to say that I found your comments very informative. I was pleased especially to hear that you thought we had done well so far with the bus contract. And all of the things that you suggested really made a lot of sense. So I'm glad that we've had this opportunity to talk to you and hear what you've had to say. It's very helpful. Thank you.
So, this is the first time that the bus contract has come up for renewal since I've been on the school committee, so I did try to read a lot of this bid and draft. I didn't read all of it. And I also noted some of the things that I thought were like, oh, good, they can't use buses that have more than 150,000 miles on them and those kinds of things, and questions about, training of drivers and things like that. So my questions are sort of more general of, well, then actually, I have two kinds. One, and so in terms of the bus drivers, are those part of the contract, or are those part of a unit in Burlington District?
They're part of the contract.
So they're hired by, they're employees of the...
Of the contractor.
Of the contractor, okay. And the monitors, who are they employed by?
Well, we had been providing and searching for monitors for parts of our contract, but I think in speaking with the special ed department that does a lot of that work, they wanted the bus company to take over that responsibility. So, Rich, I believe you wrote that into the
Correct.
bid specs,
Okay.
where the
Correct.
bus company would be providing monitors.
With a reservation that the district could continue to provide their own monitors, but it is built into the contract.
Okay. Right, and for people who didn't read the document, there's lots of requirements for monitors. And I believe, am I correct, that the district can sort of, in addition to the standard things like Corey reports, that there's also, the district has some say over who these people are going to be taking care of our kids, so,
That is
okay.
correct. Actually, the specifications call for the replacement of a driver within 24 hours of notice by the superintendent,
Okay.
with
That's
or
right.
without cause.
Good. You know you know this document a lot better than I do. And then the last question I had was something that may or may not be able to be included in this particular time that we're bidding for a contract, but is there any way that we could include a desire to go toward more energy efficient vehicles, toward lower carbon footprint vehicles? I don't think I saw anything in it, but
No.
is that something that we could request that our bidders include in their thinking or consider? I don't know the technologies, so I'm trying to use generic terms like energy efficiency and carbon footprint. But I know there are specific technologies that different vehicles, and that school districts there are districts in this country that are providing all, I don't know, all electric buses or all this other kind of bus, and I don't know what they all are. So I'm not feeling like we're like in a position to just say that's part of our requirement. But I'd like to know if there's something that that's either in it now or that we could include in it that would push in that direction and encourage that direction.
It is not included in your bid. And one of the reasons is that typically the payback period for propane buses, for
Yeah.
instance, would be entirely dependent on whether the municipality is moving in that direction also. Because it makes more sense for school buses to be propane if the town has propane vehicles and you share the cost, or the town bears the cost of a propane fueling station. That becomes cost prohibitive
Yep.
for a school district on a relatively small contract. And that's why it's not built in.
Are there any other, and obviously Burlington's not doing that right now, but, I mean, if Burlington were to put in a bunch of electric charging stations, would that make it possible to do other types of technologies?
Yes, it would. We bid a fleet of propane buses for South Shore Regional that were delivered in December. There it made sense, even though the municipality was not moving in that direction, only because the contractor for the town and for the school district agreed to wet fuel all of the buses in the yard each night. And so they did not have to have a fueling station. That made it beneficial. So it's one of the things we look at. But at this point, on the electric side, right now, the battery life for school buses is a relatively short life compared to a tank of diesel fuel or a tank of gasoline. So-
But is that battery life enough for a day driving a bus in the town of Burlington,
In
which
some
is X
instances,
number
it
of
is.
miles?
If you're traveling on 128 or on 95, and you get caught in traffic for a couple of hours, it may not be.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing with regard to the bid is that you probably saw that we did not include special ed transportation. We had recommended early on that we do look at special ed under a different process, non-30B procurement, which would be a request for proposals. The reason being is you have your lab collaborative literally next door. They did provide a proposal early on, which showed, quite frankly, if they were to assume all of your special ed transportation, there would be substantial savings. And so we would look to follow up on that and do an RFP. There are a couple of companies that could respond to an RFP that would include cost sharing and multi-district routing and scheduling. We would contact them and solicit outside the 30B process, which, as you know, you can do as soon as we get the regular transportation bid moving.
And just for the committee, we're already using lab for some of our special ed transportation with cross-district bus routes, so.
It'd be hard to, knowing the model, it'd be hard pressed to either beat the service or beat the cost. But we at least want to go through a good business practice of soliciting at least a quote from one of your other current vendors that does provide some number of vans for special ed and early childhood, as well as one other that is under contract to EDCO and to Lab already, if they would entertain a separate price for Burlington. Probably not, because they're already contracted through Lab, but at least we would owe them the opportunity to quote Burlington separately.
Mrs. Creedon?
It's great to hear, that the bid previous years has come in so, reasonable. Can you, I haven't seen your report, but can you talk to me about how the route efficiency study, how are we doing in that?
The efficiency part of this will probably not be done for another about 3 weeks. We broke it up into the bid specification, the bid, as opposed to the efficiency part. The reason being that this is time sensitive. The longer you go in the bidding season before you actually bid and open bids, the more it favors the incumbent in terms of soliciting competition from the outside. So it'll be about 3 weeks before we see the results of the efficiency part. The one thing I can tell you is that what you're doing is very cost effective. Cost effective doesn't necessarily mean efficiency, but what we have to look at is not strictly the numbers of what drives efficiency. And I will say this, that efficiency is not just the number of kids on a bus. Efficiency is based on the amount of time that you have to transport students, the bell schedules of your schools, and the amount of tier time you have between the start and ending of schools. Has to do with traffic patterns and at drive time and in mornings and afternoons. Traffic congestion around your schools with regard to how many people drive their children.
Number of stops.
Number of stops, and your walking distances and whether you enforce your walking distances. And lastly, in a community like Burlington, the expectation of the community for high-quality service.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see that because just the volume of additional stops requests that you get and, especially we've changed all the times with the schools, so I'd like to see that
Sure.
for sure. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, sorry, Mr. Eiler.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess two things. One is, since we've done so well the previous time, have we compared our previous bid specification to this one to just make sure we haven't missed anything, or has that been done, or?
Yes, I did that.
Excellent. All right, and is it possible to get a copy of this bid spec?
Yeah, it's public now. It's in the school committee packet, so we can get it to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I will share with the superintendent a page from a report that I'm finishing for another school district. But what I did is I hand wrote on the bottom your cost per day per bus, and it shows the comparison of the 35 districts that went out to bid since 2017, and shows you where you are. But in 2019, 18-19, you are the lowest of the 35. And put it in perspective for you, you're at $285 per day per bus, and most of these are in the high 300s, low 400s. And next year, for the first time, I'm seeing 2 districts of over $500 per day per bus. So,
Thank you.
Not to scare you, but
I actually have a couple of questions, too. So I believe we had to put in our last contract that seatbelts were required. Is that in this contract?
I did not require seatbelts, only in the Type 2 buses, which are the small buses. That is a
Okay.
requirement by state law. The contract with regard to, or the bid spec with regard to state seatbelts basically says that the contractor will comply with both state and federal law. Now, the reason we say that is that under state law, if the state were to mandate seatbelts in buses, it is a local mandate under Proposition 2.5, and the state would have to pay for them. They're not likely to do that. They'll wait for the federal government to mandate seatbelts, and then they'll enforce the federal mandate, which then becomes exempt from Proposition 2.5.
All right.
Now, that's not to say that you cannot require seatbelts in buses. This committee certainly can do that.
Because we currently have the seatbelts, and I know the younger grades, we have 130 field trips, we were told. Those teachers buckle those kids on the field trips in the elementary grades. And I know that has been something that we talked to this vendor about, and they put in there. So is it possible, do we just take low bids? That's it? You can't say preferential to, and then there were other things. So, for example, the training of the bus drivers with the Heimlich and Chris, the EpiPen, was that in the bus? So I've been very, very pleased with our bus because there are a lot of these intangibles, I guess, safety, health, seatbelts, the training of health. They also do not sit at the middle school for 10 minutes like I see other districts. In my own district I teach at, and the kids are there 10 minutes in the dark, buses off. And that's, to me, as a school committee member, as a parent, as a teacher, just not acceptable. So how do we get things like the training of the bus drivers, the fact that students shouldn't be sitting on a bus 10 minutes early when they could have been at their house for 10 minutes? How do we get some of that, that I consider safety for our students?
Let me take them one at a time.
Okay,
All right.
sorry.
Seatbelts. I did not require seatbelts in the large buses. If you'd like to require them, I can amend the specifications to include that. If the current buses do not have seatbelts, and I'm not sure that they all do.
It's not required as part of the contract. It's a conversation that we had with the current vendor to adapt to that.
But anyways.
So when reviewing the contract, it's not something that was added into the new contract.
Yeah,
but
the reason.
So we got lucky that he had them.
Yeah, the reason that I did not require seatbelts is that in Massachusetts, unless after 2014, you ordered new buses that were seatbelt prepared and had the right type of seat back. If you did not do that as a contractor, then the current buses cannot be retrofitted with seatbelts, which means that you have to buy new buses. It becomes very expensive to buy new buses for the purpose of seatbelts.
Okay,
All right.
and then the health,
Secondly,
the training of.
Secondly, the district reserves the right to require the contractor to submit the drivers for training. That training to include first aid, CPR, EpiPen, nut allergy, blood pathogen training, assertive discipline.
Child abuse
I'm sorry?
and child abuse.
Right.
So that would be in the contract?
It's in the contract,
Okay.
if the district requires it, but it becomes a district expense to provide that. Because most EpiPen training would be provided by either your school nurse or your public health nurse.
Yep.
Page 22 of the contract,
Yep,
yeah.
okay, and
Yeah.
then this habit of the other buses picking up the kids
Yeah.
early and then
Yeah.
just sitting in front of the middle school,
Yeah.
the
No,
first school?
no child's supposed to be dropped off at the school no earlier than 10 minutes before school time.
But they sit there on the bus for 10 minutes?
then that becomes a routing and scheduling issue, and then the schedule should be backed up by, or brought forward by 10 minutes, so that doesn't happen. Unless that bus is making multi-district, multi-school stops, in which case they may sit there for 10 minutes so that they get to the next stop on time, as opposed to 10 minutes early.
But not with kids in the bus.
Now with kids on the bus.
Oh, okay, I'm
Right,
talking
not with on
kids
the
are
bus.
sitting
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
bus,
yeah.
okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question on
There are
that?
two ways to handle that. One is to adjust the schedule, the other is to allow the children off the bus if there's supervision at the school that early.
Okay.
So there's two ways to address that.
So one of the things I did read was, thank you, that it does specify that buses should not be dropping students off more than 10 minutes before. And it's my understanding that our teachers are there to receive the kids 10 minutes before the bell. Is that correct?
Yes.
So
and-
therefore, once the bus arrives, the teachers are there, they don't have to sit on the bus.
Right.
So that's written into this document, right?
As a veteran bus rider, where the buses sometimes will wait is for their next route to start. So
Which is
again,
fine.
it's just the driver would pull into St. Margaret's parking lot and might wait 5 minutes before starting the next route. But the time, because we reuse all the buses through the 3 tiers, they're usually want to drop off all their kids and get to their next stop. So they don't have time, given the tiers that we have set up, and for them to idle with the students in the bus. We need the kids right off the bus. And again, so we've worked it out. I do think it's a routing and a start time problem. And so let's say we were to create this issue where buses were arriving 10 minutes before they needed to, and we're holding kids in the bus. If we
Right.
had that luxury, more than likely, we would recommend moving the school start time 10 minutes earlier, so they would just drop off, you know what I'm saying, drop off the kids, so.
Or start the route 10 minutes
Or-
later.
Or start the kids. So-
Exactly,
I
exactly.
think we've worked that out. We
Right.
don't want the kids on buses either, so,
Okay.
but I think the vendor, our current vendor has always been willing to work with us. I'm not sure you can write that into the specifications per se. Maybe you can, but I just think that that's the routing is more for us to work out too,
Right.
right?
Right. One of the recommendations you'll see is to change your routing software to something that is, one, less expensive, but much more intuitive with regard to efficiencies. And you may not do it for next year, but, perhaps the year after.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, I have a follow-up.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I don't think I would be in favor of requiring in this bid that the contractor provide seatbelts. I don't want to have Burlington be one of those communities that's spending $500 per bus. Because as you said, they can't retrofit the existing buses.
Right.
And they have to go out and buy a whole new fleet of buses to comply with the seatbelt requirement. And I'm not sure there's any studies that show that seatbelts are even a benefit.
Actually, there are studies, but they do not show that they're a benefit.
Because if a bus tips over and the kids have seatbelts on, what happens? And those are the stories you see in the news all the time. So I would not be in favor as a member of this committee to require that in this particular bid. I think we can
Actually,
leave it out.
most of the accidents involving students and school buses, the accidents happen when this child is outside the bus. The most typical one is a driver passing the bus with the lights going on while a child is crossing the street. The other is a child going out the door, scrambling up a snowbank, and sliding back down and falling under the wheels of the bus as the bus pulls away. Those are the two most common accidents in this country, with the exception of a school bus that gets hit by a train or by a tractor trailer at an intersection. Those are catastrophic. They're rare, but they do make the news. But the National Highway Transportation Safety Bureau conducts and has conducted tests on seatbelts and accidents annually for the last, as far back as I remember. And they found, up until last year, that the types of injuries to students were more prevalent with seatbelts than without seatbelts. Because they were lap belts only, and kids were going forward, they were getting back and neck injuries. School buses are one of the safest methods of transporting anyone, including children, because it's all compartmentalized. You have, bumpers and pads on the backs of the seats, on the sides of the seats. And with the exception of the bus that rolls over, the children bounce around, they get bruises, but they don't necessarily get severe injuries. The caveat has been that now the National Highway Transportation Safety Bureau has recommended the three-point harnesses for school buses as being safer than just lap belts. So, but they're expensive, and the real question is whether the federal government will mandate them or not. But even if they do, typically when there is a mandate of that type, whether it's a state or federal, buses that are in existence are grandfathered because, as you said, you can't retrofit buses for seatbelts, and any new bus to be purchased, to be put in service, would have either three-point harness or other safety features.
Thank you. Mrs. Monco.
I'd like to ask Bob if you would check with our current provider on what the story is with the larger buses about seatbelts. Do they have them? Were they built with them? Were they retrofitted? I'd just like to know the answer to the questions.
I know parts of that question already, just because they have multiple year purchase buses. So some were purchased. I know in recent years, some new conversations regarding 5-point harness have come into play. So we've actually had the bus company or partnership conversation with them, had them retrofit some of their buses, front 2 seats, or sometimes the front 3 seats.
For the little kids.
Exactly, for
Yeah.
little kids. But the 71 passenger buses, all of them have some seat belts on them, and some of them, the whole buses are all seat belts. So
Are they
I'll have to double
3-point?
check. They're
No.
not
Oh,
3-point, they're just lap belts.
If the committee would like, we could write into the specification that any new buses purchased would be either seatbelt ready or have seatbelts, whichever you prefer.
That sounds good.
Ms. Simon?
Given the conversation, I also wanted, one of the things I did notice in the parts I read, there is a reference to 5-point harnesses
Harnesses.
in,
Yeah.
and could you specify which buses that is?
Yeah, they're for the early childhood buses,
Okay.
and they're the first row of seats in each bus.
Okay, and so all the seats in the preschool?
Yes.
And
Not all the seats in the bus, the first row
of the
of
preschool
each bus.
Okay.
That does preschool.
So that's like 4 seats?
It would be 6.
3 per seat.
Three and three
Okay.
in the
Thank you.
first row. And the reason they're in the first row is that unless you're going to put bus monitors on every bus to make sure that children are strapped in correctly, in the first row, the bus driver can see those children and make sure that they're secured before he drives away.
Mrs. Creedon?
Can you tell me the timeline for when this is going out to bid and what the next process, how it's gonna work?
I would defer to the committee as to whether they would allow us to continue with the process after this evening. Assuming that the draft of the bid specs was approved this evening, which it may or may not be, the publication in Goods and Services Bulletin could be March 11th, a bidders meeting on March 29th, public bid opening on April 12th, and a presentation and recommendation for a bid award to the committee on April 16th. That's about as quickly as we could do it.
Would you do it though before your studies completed?
The study would be done, during that period. And we could make any changes that we would like to make to the bid specification by addendum up until April 12th.
Okay.
And typically, when we have our bidders meeting, we do at least one addendum answering all the questions. Any questions that come in will come into Bob. He will then forward the questions to me. I will draft an answer for the school department. And whatever questions come in during that 5-week period, every question gets answered by addendum. Every addendum goes out to every prospective bidder. So it's a level playing field. We're not, talking to Company A or Company B separately. Everybody gets the same information.
My reason for the question is because you said that you were gonna award the contract the first year, so I just wanted to make sure that we had all the information
Mhm.
before the contract's awarded.
Correct.
If there needs to be some changes.
Correct.
Makes sense.
Mrs. Monaco?
Two things. Diane, I know where you're coming from, but I don't think the roots have that much to do with the contract. I think that's something we,
I agree, but I think that was part of the conversation.
Yes.
From the beginning, so I want to make sure that everything is done so that, because we know it's coming outside of the budget, so we want to make sure we have all the information.
right.
It is part of my scope of work
Okay.
to look at the efficiency of what you're doing.
And my other comment is I'm one, I don't know if there are two more, but I would like to add that any new buses be fitted with seatbelts, and you need two more people to make that official.
3-point harnesses, which is the standard, as opposed to, actually, it's lap and shoulder belts, which are primarily being used now, except for early childhood, which is the double.
5 point. Yeah,
But we've taken care of that in the spec already. So 3-point harnesses, lap and shoulder belts.
yes.
Ms. Simon has a question to that.
What is your, if we were to put that in, which sounds good to me, that if they purchase new buses, it would have that. Do you see any negatives to that?
No.
Okay.
No. You'll see at the end of the bid spec, other equipment that we've listed as optional cost.
Okay.
In the event that you want to have active GPS with automatic vehicle locator and other things that are electronic child check system, for instance. At least you'll know what the cost is per day per bus in the event that you want to move in that direction.
So if we were to vote to ask you to add that, it would just be part of the bid, it wouldn't have any
It's part of the bid now.
detriment.
You could,
No, it's
before you
not.
award the contract, you could tell the contractor, yes, we want item A, it's a menu.
Yeah.
You want item A, we want item C, we don't want item D. Or
Before or after they bid on it?
After they bid, they're going to give you the price per day for
Okay.
those add-ons
Oh, okay.
to the bus.
Okay.
And as I said, it's a menu. And then you can pick and choose from that menu what you can afford or what you would like to include.
And then earlier you mentioned that something about 2014. So are they required to buy new buses that have, what is it they are required to buy new buses with after 2014?
No, it was after 2014 that they could buy buses that were, that did not have seat belts, but that the seats could be retrofitted to put in seat belts.
Okay,
Model year prior to 2014, it was not an option.
okay, so we could request that they purchase fittable buses only, or we could request that they have the seatbelts?
I would think that if they purchase a new bus and they build it into the new bus, the cost of building seat belts into a brand-new bus that they're going to use over 10 years
Yeah.
becomes a relatively small cost compared to buying a whole new bus now that they're going to use at the rest of this contract or for a relatively shorter period of time.
Is that buildable menu you talked about in this bid?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh, what page was it? I missed it. Oh. Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, page 20 starts with cameras, then goes to stop arms, GPS,
And
child.
if you look at the page 66, that is where it is spelled out as optional equipment on the actual bid form. And it includes active GPS, Zonar or equivalent, 3-camera digital camera system, crossing gates, or electronic child check system.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Do you have Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I just have a comment. Based on the timeline, I think that we ought to vote to approve the bid specs this evening so that we can have dollar figures in place by April 15th. I mean, I'd like to have these figures available as quickly as we can before town meeting, particularly in light of what Mr. Murphy said, that we're going to be asking the town to consider this figure outside of our guidelines. So I guess I'll make a motion for discussion purposes that we approve the draft bid specifications that were submitted in our backup materials.
I'll second for discussion.
Should we add in that little what?
Well, I think that, yeah, and with a menu that includes if the contractor, the successful bidder, purchases new buses, after executing the contract, that those new buses be fitted with three-point harness system.
Mr. Murphy?
Before voting on the motion, I'd like to just hear from the administration, whether it's Eric or Bob, whether you're satisfied with the specs as is, or do they still need some tweaking or whatever? I mean, we're meeting again next week. If we push it back 1 week, we're still in the relatively the same time frame. But I just want to make sure that you guys are satisfied with the way that they are now, or is there anything else that you have to do to them?
Again, I've been reading it, yes, and I have had discussions, of course, with Mr. Labrie. I am comfortable with the way the contract is, but I do not want to rush it. Obviously, tonight is definitely a point for the committee to see this, have discussion on it. So I would seek your guidance. I don't think it's a big problem if we were to wait another week. But I do obviously feel that the longer and longer we wait could affect the potential bidders that we have and so forth. Again, you did bring up a good point as to whether or not we wanted to add the three-point harnesses or make the seatbelts ready on new purchases. While there is provision for the law, if the law changes to make the bus company come up to that point, if we did want to have that right now, I mean, again, having this conversation is great, so we can add that change.
So again, Mr. Mayor, I don't see the harm in making this a first reading, knowing, and we'll have it on the agenda for next week. That'll give, we'll share the document then out. You guys can take a look at it over the course of the week. Again, I don't think that sets us back, Rich, very far if we have permission granted on next Tuesday.
Just the timeline that you indicated would put out the bids being opened after we go to Ways and Means, but before we go to town meeting. And it would still be in that same window of time, whether we voted it tonight or voted it a week from now. So I just want to, I mean, we're probably going to have to, I would imagine, since it's not going to be ready when we vote our budget or when town meeting does, amend our budget on town meeting floor for whatever the amount of the bus contract winds up being. So as long as we have that number prior to the town meeting, we can make it work. So.
Right, so again, I just have to keep repeating, because I say it myself, it's the increase in the transportation. I think we're building the budget around what we're currently spending.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's gonna be, and I'm assuming an increase, but I think you said that's a relatively safe assumption, given sort of what we're.
Oh, I thought it was the
we're seeing.
whole bus contract.
No, so again, it's just gonna be the increase.
Waiting a week is going to put us in the same time frame. If there's any value to you guys looking at it to make sure it's all set, fine. If you're happy with it now.
If I could offer a suggestion?
Sure.
If the committee would allow us to at least advertise in goods and services, because that's just a weekly publication. If we hit the goods and services and a legal notice for March 11th, we're not showing the bid specs, we're not releasing the bid specs, we're just putting a notice that Burlington is going to bid for school transportation, and an approximate dollar figure of what the contract is, and the length of the contract being 5 years. We would not release the bids until after the committee approves them at their meeting next week. And we still would have the time to make any changes that the committee would want before we release them. But then we wouldn't lose the timeline of being able to open by April 16th.
Mr. Nelson?
Madam Chairman, that's my biggest concern is the timeline. So having heard the discussion, I will withdraw my motion to approve the bid specs tonight, and I will make a motion that we allow for the publication as directed by Mr. Labrie of Burlington's intent to go out to bid.
I withdraw my second, but I'll second the new motion.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay,
Do we want to discuss tonight whether we want to include an amendment about the seatbelts?
I've included that in the next change.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, passes 5-0-0. And I assume if we have any other questions, Ways and Means, in the meantime, we can go through Bob.
Send it Bob, and
Okay.
he knows how to reach me.
Great, and we'll have this on the agenda for next meeting.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Rich, thank you. All right, Madam Chair,
Yes.
we have, again, I'm trying to get to people. Could we do warrant articles
Yep.
now, please?
Yes.
And again, we just, I'm going to let Bob speak to some of them, but I have an interest in two of them. So, and they're curricular in nature, and I think they require some background. So Bob's going to go through all of them in terms of the total number, the rough total number available. As we've said, this is a first read at the warrants. These are not in any particular order of priority. I'll say that again, these are not in any particular order of priority. We've just started with sort of a listing of the warrants. But again, I think there are a couple that require some curricular background. So I wanted to start, and I'm going out of order, but with the Project Adventure warrant article, which is the $102,000. I want to invite up Matt. And Matt, you need the projection cord?
Yeah.
So, sorry. Jump that over. We're
it
joined
came in our
tonight by
packet.
Matt Jackling, who's our Director of Health and PE. Matt's going to talk a little bit about Project Adventure itself, what it is, why it is, and then, Matt, just remind me, I wanted you to briefly comment on the scheduling of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, because I think that's coming up. And then the high school has a important day that you spend a lot of time on with some other faculty members tomorrow for kids, Wellness Day. So just a couple things, and again, I know it's late, we want to try to
No problem.
move you along.
I'm sleeping here tonight anyways. So just first on YRBS, just an update on that. We recently reviewed, we're going through the process with JSI and reviewing what we will be putting out to our staff. And we did our questions where we had to review the questions proposed by JSI to be in line with the rest of the Middlesex League. And the superintendent's request to have a concurrent survey that most schools are contributing to. And so with that, we are in the final stages of planning the actual questionnaire with the hope to be implementing within a month. So our YRBS, as of now, we haven't had a concrete date yet in the high school, but we're looking at the end of March. And this is all going to be delivered online, so it's been a lot more time efficient. And the subcommittee that's been working on developing the questions have kind of streamlined that, and that's been very helpful through JSI. And we're very appreciative of their support throughout that, because it's taken a lot of the legwork out of it. You know, we kind of make our requests, and they get us back different documents, and we go from there.
And again, just the YRBS is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We give it to students from grade 7 through grade 12.
Yep. And also, to their credit, it's allowed our turnaround time to be a lot more effective. We normally get our reports back within about 2 months, which in the past has been going into the next school year. So it's been very helpful to have them on board. What was the other thing you asked me about prior to Project Adventure?
The
Sorry.
Wellness Day.
Yes, Wellness Day. Thank you. So tomorrow at the high school, we're having our Wellness Day, which is a new initiative in the high school. We've kind of copied some other districts that have done it. We're trying to do it better. Tomorrow's the first crack, so we'll see. Up on the board here, I have kind of what the schedule is looking like. What Wellness Day is basically faculty-driven workshops determined by our high school faculty that fall under 3 categories, that fall under healthy choices, that fall under self-care, and mental health awareness. And so we have roughly about 85% of our high school staff who are putting together these workshops that we're presenting tomorrow to different grades. Additionally, we have a group called the Improbable Players coming in to provide a play that works as an assembly. Everyone in the Improbable Players is a recovering addict, And what they do is provide unique perspective on the opioid epidemic, on the escalation of drug abuse throughout high school. And so each student tomorrow, in lieu of going to traditional classes, will actually be going to an assembly and then 3 different workshops. Each workshop or assembly is an hour long. We've tried to make the day as opposite from our normal schedule as possible, just to make sure that our students are understanding that it's meant to be a day for them and not for academic coursework. We've noticed through our YRBS findings and just through having basic discussions with how our students are handling their year, that their ability to handle stress, their ability to manage their time, and to kind of break down their workload to be a little bit more effective is really struggling. And so part of our reaction to previous YRBS has been to implement more practice of stress reduction and kind of minimizing that effect on students. And so this is one of our first major steps in doing so. We've always kind of preached, but never really implemented practice throughout the school day, and so this is our first time at actually taking a school day and fully focusing on student wellness. So as of right now, I pulled up here, we have about 12 different workshops running in each category at one time, so a total of 36 workshops every hour. I'm going to pull up my dashboard here. Thank you to Dennis, who showed me all this, and I've only been lost a little bit. We have 922 students registered, and we're running 138 different sessions, so around 36, 37 every block that we've determined. We're also experimenting with just some different ideas with what kind of these workshops can be. They range from talking about eating disorders and mindfulness and how meditation and yoga can really help reduce stress, to self-care, which is more taking time for things that you're interested in that maybe we don't create enough time for in a traditional high school curriculum, such as we're about to talk about, Project Adventure, but also more of understanding how flexibility plays a role in your overall well-being, how music is an outlet and helps reduce stress and can be, performance anxiety is actually a good thing sometimes, and how that can actually work out for students to push themselves and push their limits, but also do that in a safe space. So we're really excited about the day. We're very excited about the concept that we're trying to implement, and so hopefully no major issues tomorrow. But again, we think it's a step in the right direction. And to be honest, our student feedback has been really positive. They've been wary in the beginning because they didn't really understand, but I met with student council and a couple student groups before we released this information, and they were on board. And now that it's kind of just become the norm and this is what's happening tomorrow, students are into it. And so I'm really excited about it. Again, I'm hopeful most specifically that students are going to take advantage of the freedom of the choice that they're given and value that. And from who I've talked to, they have so far. And I think as we talked about our high school students kind of taking on a little bit more of a proactive role in their own education, I think that's kind of the model that we'd like to kind of explore a little bit more as we move forward, because we've talked about how are we preparing them for college, how are we preparing them for what's next, and whether or not what we do does a great job of doing that. And I think opportunities like this, sparsed out throughout the school year, can really do a good job of giving them that freedom, but also making it be student driven and allowing that to really reflect what they're interested in. So that's tomorrow. If you hear any sirens, it's not me. So we'll see what happens. And then the last part was Project Adventure. So excuse me 1 second, I got too many tabs up. Okay. So just to provide some background on Project Adventure, you've probably heard of it before, and for this school, it's been a component of our physical education process for over 25 years. Talking to some older faculty members, trying to determine if they could remember when it started, and we can't, which means it's been here for a very long time. We have a lot of staff members who are high school teachers now, who had it when they were in high school. So we know it's been around for at least 25, 30 years.
We might have some board members who.
Yes,
I think it started in the mid-'80s.
Okay.
Mid to late '80s.
All right. Well, so with it.
Oh, you did?
All right.
Okay.
There we go.
I'd say
Early '80s.
Even better. No, of course not.
You're only 4 years
I'm sure your
old,
mother
right?
said that, yeah. So, it's been around for a long time, and we're actually very lucky. We've always had the opportunity to, one, have a lot of elements within the indoor gyms, but also we had an outdoor adventure course that was heavily utilized throughout. And to be honest, taking on my role as district coordinator for health and PE, the inspections of those of those courses that's kind of, every time we've had the outdoor course inspected, it's always come back with, we're good, we're safe. You're gonna need to do something with that eventually, because it's just been around for a long time, and the upkeep and where the location is and everything has kind of become problematic. Well, back in 2017, we had a couple of huge windstorms, and effectively our Project Adventure course became unusable. The major trees that were some of the major anchors for how the course was set became uprooted, and then it became an issue of just safety and getting contractors back there to take it down, let alone students. So we've not been able to utilize any of that for the past 2 years. At the end of the 2018 school year, we weren't able to, and now going into the end of the 2018-19, we won't be able to also. So that's just the history on what we have going on. It's really been detrimental to our program. In my mind, and I've listed here the rationale for why we need it, Project Adventure is one of those rare curriculums that brings in all those buzzwords that that students and districts always talk about, but actually implements them on a day-to-day basis. It has an entire social emotional learning curriculum that's been a part of the Project Adventure curriculum since 1984, or since we've been doing it here. It's all of those things every day. And when we talk about trying to support those programs and whether or not those are priorities, I really feel like this is a prime example of how a school can demonstrate that, because Project Adventure takes those words that we hear about like student efficacy and their resiliency and their ability to be empathetic, and practices it every single day. Project Adventure has taken on, for me, it's really, as I imagine for some of you, clearly, have gone through it, it's a really different experience for physical education. I think in physical education now, and even compared to past years, has always been kind of a hit or miss area with certain students. If you're not overtly athletic, if you're not comfortable in that kind of environment, physical education can be something you don't look forward to. Project Adventure has never had that. That sophomore year, which is the full Project Adventure curriculum, has been the highlight of our program at the high school since I've been here, which is 14 years now. Every student enjoys it because it takes that dynamic where, oh, I'm good at this sport, so I'll dominate physical education class, and totally flips it on its head. As a mediocre athlete in high school, I cannot tell you, when I climbed the wall, I was shaking, my knees were knocking together. I was terrified, and that was fun, like to have that be different, and to see my classmates in a different way. And Project Adventure is really one of the only places that provides that, because it builds on this idea of continual trust that you build with your teammates, with your classmates. It starts from a very good point with low elements where you're talking about team building and leadership skills, and it grows into this end point where now you're out in a 50-foot high element with your classmates belaying and being the support structure for you, and you have, like, they're the safest part of the process. You're scared about the height. You're not scared about your classmates that are helping you out. And to go from just meeting 20 weeks ago, especially random friend groups, random peers in one group, to have them be literally having your safety in their hands as they belay and support belay you, that's a growth process that we don't get anywhere else. And so our students have really benefited from this program. And the biggest detriment from this, unfortunately, from our program being, from our course being damaged, has been we haven't been able to get to that final payoff. And so it's not that our Project Adventure program has totally disintegrated without it. And I know that probably doesn't help my cause. But at the same time, they're getting 70% of it, but the last 30 are worth more than that first 70. They aren't being able to go out and really test themselves in environments that they haven't been to before. They're not able to really put themselves in areas where they have to explicitly trust their colleagues, their peers. And so that last part of it is really important to the whole benefit of what Project Adventure is. I just wrote down here a couple of things that Project Adventure offers to participants. Again, that social emotional learning curriculum. If you go through their website, and I will get this to Sharon later on, they actually specifically outline how they implement social emotional learning through experiential learning cycle. They have a component called the full value contract, which at the beginning of each program, they talk about what their class is going to be built on for the next 20 weeks, which is a pretty profound thing for 10th graders to consider, especially because they eventually back that up with their actions, which is one of the more impressive things that we can say about it. My favorite part is the challenge by choice component. Challenge by choice means that students are taking what they think that they're good at or what they're able to handle, and they choose what component of Project Adventure that they're going to become masters of, that they're going to really focus on. In the end, every part is just as important as the other, because you can't climb without belay, you can't belay without support belay. And so students really focus in on things that they feel they'll thrive at. The job of our instructors is to take students, put them in those areas to be secure and to be safe, and then kind of push them to move up to the next one. And we see that growth throughout that. And again, because it's not ball related, because it's not volleyball, it really takes a lot of those stereotypes of what PE is and really allows kids who aren't normally accessing PE as a good environment and taking advantage of that. And then lastly, the one component that I just wanted to mention, so the SEL options are listed here. Challenge by choice is mentioned. Most importantly for me, it's the benefits beyond PE that this can really offer. And I think in the past, we focused a lot on just our curricular need, and that's clearly evident, but I think we haven't taken advantage of what Project Adventure can offer district-wide or building-wide. Project Adventure has proven to be a leader in developing leadership activities, cooperation, collaboration activities, and as a district, we're always looking for ways that we can bring students together, we can bring faculty members together, buildings together, and we've never utilized that component of it. I think moving forward, if this were to be happening, we would be able to do that. Because right now, we're always looking for authentic experiences for BPSCon. We're always looking for things that we can help, things that we can pass into the lab program. We're always looking for, Bridge sends students up to Project Adventure in Beverly because we can't use our own course. And so we know this is a useful forum for that, and we just haven't, these past 2 years, we haven't really had the opportunity. And to be honest, I think that's caused us to realize how sorely we miss it. Because we're having kids go through this curriculum, we're having these opportunities where now we have to go other places for similar experiences, when in fact we can house those ourselves and minimize, hopefully, costs over that. Additionally, to the benefits within BHS and BPS, we're looking at community benefits. This is something that a lot of schools have started to develop relationships with town rec departments, as long as the associated supervisors have been trained by Project Adventure. This is something that we can continue out into sports groups, into town rec, into other community. What's that? Absolutely. Team builder. So we're getting Sharon up there. All right, it's going to happen. So with that, it really is an untapped aspect of our curriculum that in the past was so beneficial and we valued it for what it was, but looking forward, it's something that can really spread and be not just impactful to our students, but also to our building in our curriculum, in our community. Looking into some of the specifics that were listed here, the price that came with our proposed quote is expensive because it is a full course. In the past, we've done it in pieces. And right now, that's because we've had an existing course, and we just don't have that anymore. We kind of have to start at zero. And with that, that's going to take a financial commitment. But we also think that over time, that commitment between the amount that we're paying to send other people to other courses and to have that in-house, I think a lot of that may end up recouping itself. The total cost for installation based on the quote that we have is $107,000, which is a lot. But a lot of that has to do with, again, we are building a course that is applicable for at least our high school curriculum with hopefully our K through 12 curriculum. There are lower elements that middle school can use tomorrow if it's out there. That's safe, that is there for the team purposes that we talked about, the team building aspects and leadership development. And as we start to work our way through, it's something that if we look and really look to push this curriculum, it's something we can implement even in the elementary level. I don't think they're coming out there every day, but it's something that we can build towards. Because every PE department in each building has some components of Project Adventure already built into it. Now it's kind of utilizing a new course that could all benefit from it. Additionally, in the costs had to do, we had an additional $9,000 that had to do with staff training. That's inspection and staff training. Inspection has to happen every year. We have that already built into our budget yearly. The staff training component would be for the initial training of all staff who want to be a part of it. So that would be our high school PE staff, our middle school PE staff, and then seeing what other community members or district members who want to be a part of this. Now, that's for 14 individuals to participate in. Obviously, that number goes down the less we have. But again, hosting that and having Project Adventure come to our course and train our staff is so much more valuable than sending them up to Beverly to work on a hypothetical course that may or may not be the same as what we have. So yes, it's a large number in the beginning, but I do think if we look at what the costs are over a long-term period, and more importantly, how applicable this is to other things other than our sophomore PE curriculum, I think it ends up being very beneficial for the district as a whole.
Matt?
Yeah.
Sorry. So you guys are probably wondering why the number in your packet is different than the number. So the information that I provided to Sharon was in a previous conversation that we had with Matt, and then since then, Matt has provided me with updated quote and got a revised quote from Project Adventure as well, too. So that's why the new number is 116,000, where it's different in your packet.
Yeah, the previous quote was from the fall, and unfortunately, costs have gone up every fiscal year. The last thing to really mention here is just probably one of the more practical questions we have is location. Unfortunately, the Project Adventure course, as we said, is kind of out in the woods. It takes about 10 minutes to walk out there currently, which was detrimental to class time. And so what we're looking for we have 3 areas. We kind of have 2 favorites and a third that is like the emergency. Hopefully not. But we do have options. And talking to Project Adventure and talking to Principal Sullivan and other administrative leaders, it's been, let's try and ascertain funds first before we commit to a specific space. The 2 areas that are probably more favorable, if you look up here, the bottom left is the far end of our band practice field. And then the other area up in red and purple is across from the football field. There's, as you walk into that big field where like the throwing, there's a softball field back there. Yes, I can zoom in, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe I can't. That's probably as far as I can go. Those areas they're open spaces, they're level, they're relatively dry. And again, we want our Project Adventure course to be something we see. In the past, it's always been hidden. We want this to be a highlight of what we offer as a school. And when you drive in, coming past that football field, and you come through, you want to be able to see what we're doing. And as a department, we're proud of our Project Adventure curriculum. We think it's probably the best thing we offer for high school PE. And so we want other people as they come in to see what we can do and see like the magnitude of what we're offering. Because again, I feel it's the most valuable PE program we have K through 12. It provides leadership skills, it provides self-motivated students to really learn on the fly, and more importantly, it breaks down social barriers between students, which to me is social emotional learning. And so we've really had a strong push from our staff and, to be honest, from our students to kind of push for this. The first workshop that filled up at Wellness Day tomorrow is the Project Adventure course at all 4 levels. And when you're asking students, hey, do you want to be active? Normally, yes is not the answer you get. So the fact that it filled up quickly and students were excited about it, it really shows there's a want for this from our student body. And we've traditionally had this luxury that it kind of in our backyard that we've always utilized, but we've never really taken advantage of school-wide. And so I'm hopeful that if we were to get these funds, we'd be able to kind of take that next step and really make this a main staple of our programming.
So this is, again, it's a curricular offering. I just wanted people to get some background on it. The course has a long history in Burlington. I think it's 30 years old. We've maintained it. I think using trees as some of the course options has its limitations. I believe the course that's being designed now would use
all telephone poles.
All
Yep.
telephone poles, so we wouldn't be as reliant on trees or then have the problems of needing to maintain the trees or losing the trees. So this would be a more sustainable course, and again, it is a part of our curriculum. I'm not exactly sure how to do the backup material for town meeting, so we're working on that. We can't really take map, or maybe we can put a short video in, I'm not really sure, but I just wanted to explain to the committee, this is it's not like a roof or anything that people can imagine. This is a Project Adventure course that I just wanted to give Matt an opportunity to explain to the committee and the importance of. So that's
Ms. Hyman?
Yeah, I think it's great, and I didn't realize that we lost the Project Adventure course, so I'm glad that we're trying to move forward on this. And I had another thought, which I just forgot, so why doesn't someone else have it?
Mr. Murphy?
This is to Bob or Eric. Do we have a number yet in terms of our allotment for warrant articles?
Preliminary conversations with the new town manager is still a split of 2.8 million in free cash for warrant articles. So we're starting at that 50%, 1.4.
1.4-ish, okay. I mean, we have a list of 1.7 and change here, so there'll have to be some culling out.
Yep.
So I don't know what the plan is, if we're gonna discuss them tonight, or you're just putting us on notice, but
We're really going to discuss in depth two that I had a curricular background. I just wanted to do the first reading, Bob. Again, we can go through the building stuff more quickly. I just thought that, a Pine Glen sewer pump wouldn't take as much conversation as a project adventure course, so we can spend 20 minutes on a sewer pump if you'd like. But I'm assuming we can probably go through most of these quickly. Again, the point of tonight was just to get some projects out there. Still like you to, we'll get you some background information for everybody, and then we still need to prioritize and then get them down to roughly the 1.4.
okay, if I could just, then I'm gonna throw my 2 cents worth in. I'm gonna support this one. I mean, Matt did a great job with his presentation. He's clearly very, very excited about it. But I think we've done a pretty good job over the years with budgets and time constraints. The trend seems to be reading, writing, arithmetic, and a lot of other stuff falls by the wayside. And I think we've done a nice job of supporting and keeping things like the arts and music and other courses that don't necessarily fall in line with the basics available, because I think it's important that we do it. And I think this is a perfect example of that. It hits a target audience of people that, as Matt said, might not otherwise care if they ever stepped in a gym class in their life, but this gives them an opportunity to get involved in this type of a project. So I would, and not that the sewer thing at Pine Glen isn't important, but I would clearly, to me, this is a priority for me, certainly. I think it's something we should support.
If I could just, I'm sorry, if I could just add a note. To be clear, Project Adventure is a graduation requirement, so every student who comes to our building takes it. It's one of the rare courses that we have for that.
So, and I wanted to just reinforce that as a capital warrant article, it's because we're going to be building the course. And so it really, even though it is curricular, and, we need to build this course to fulfill that last 30% of this curricular offering. So it is, if we needed a new balance beam, we would purchase it as a capital, well, okay, that's a bad example, but this is, if we need, when we built a new track, that was a capital item, and I think this is in that kind of category, and having the training to make sure we can use it properly is great, and I love all your ideas of how to expand it to other programming, other, the rec department, whatever, that we should be looking at all those options. Thank you.
Ms. Marco?
Yes, I completely support this. I have had some experience with it, and I am confident that Project Adventure builds confidence in kids. It builds self-esteem. It teaches them to do things that they would not otherwise have done. It makes them less fearful. It's team building. I've seen it. I've really seen it play out, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's too bad that we haven't had a newer area sooner. The only question I have is going back in time to when I had considerable involvement with it. There was an opportunity not just for sophomores, but as the kids got older, some of them became, I don't know how they incorporated it into the curriculum and the gym class and whatever, but some of the older kids stayed in Project Adventure and worked with the kids coming up and became sort of advanced in it. Would that be something that we're looking at now too?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we've had a push for kind of revamping our upperclassmen electives. First of all, creating upperclassmen electives, because traditionally juniors now all take junior PE, which is kind of back to like traditional team sports. Part of the pause on that has been the lack of, again, the course damage. We've talked about kind of putting together a plan for, as we change that idea of changing our long-term curriculum, of having more project adventure-based classes as kind of to fulfill that junior elective, if again we were to get a course that could support that. Additionally, we've had Adventure Club in the past, which no longer exists, again, because we don't have the resources to be able to do that because of the course. The things we can do indoors, they're valuable, but it's a different animal when you're outside and you're away from the school. Even though you're only 50 yards over there, it's different, and the height and the elements all play a role. And I totally agree. It's unbelievably valuable for the development of those traits that we're trying to reinforce in our students.
So I completely support it. I would ask that as a curriculum piece, someone look at building it in so that it is an elective for juniors and seniors to work, with the younger kids as leaders and whatever.
No, I think it's valuable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I also want to just echo my support for the project. I remember when my children were going through BHS, they absolutely loved Project Adventure, and the belaying and the rock climbing, and they still do it now as adults, and I don't think they would have been anywhere near as likely to even try it if they hadn't learned it at an early age. I mean, rock climbing is pretty intimidating, but when you learn it when you're young, it stays with you. And I remember my son coming home and talking about the outdoor adventures, and I think they had to walk across a rope over a swamp, and some of the kids would fall in the swamp, and they would all help each other, and they loved it. And they look forward to it, as you said. It's something that not everyone is engaged in the regular sporting activities, but when it comes to this type of a project, it brings something out in just about everybody. So I fully support it. I think it's time that we did invest some capital in the phys ed department, and I think that given the allotment that we have this year for capital warrant articles, I'm very hopeful that we can get this thing done.
Great. Just to comment on Mr. Nelson's discussion, please, here. It's one of the activities that is lifelong.
Yes.
Many students, we all have our glory years of playing quarterback and all that, but you can't be a quarterback when you're in your 30s,
Yeah.
And so a lot of our students take this and really play it out over their lifetime of a love for being outside and taking adventure type skills. It's really an enjoyable thing to see, is the student enjoyment and understanding that this is something that they can build upon as they go out into the world.
Tom Brady's in his 40s.
Yeah, outlier.
Outlier.
I know, he's ruining most examples.
Oh, thank you.
Matt, thank you.
All right.
Was
Again,
excellent. Oh, sorry. Ways and Means?
I wanted to make one thing. I'd like to see actually what the course for the backup material.
Sure.
When it comes through, I want to see what the course, just as if it was like a playground for an elementary school. I'd like to see what the course, what we're buying.
Okay.
That's what it, for the backup.
like the design and what the obstacles would be or whatever.
It doesn't have to be exact, but
Yep.
even if it's a picture, just because I think it's important if we're going to see it coming into the high school. For the backup material.
Perfect.
And then would the current freshman class and sophomore class that missed this opportunity, will they, as juniors and seniors or junior, get this?
The hope would be yes. Project Adventure, the company is very efficient in building new courses, and so if this was something that we would be able to pass by the end of the school year, talking to their contact who's provided us with quotes, this would be up by the fall.
And that, is it for
So then we would be.
sophomore year?
It's in the spring of every year when we do Project Adventure, so we would be working backwards with a couple of grades
Good.
who've made it, but we would be
Perfect.
making that effort to bring them into, again, reestablishing an Adventure Club and getting those kids back out and getting the opportunity. And through opportunities like Wellness Day, where we can now.
We're going to hold you to it.
Good, you're getting out there.
Thank
All right,
you.
You're going up. All right, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Matt, thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Again, the next one, I am going to put off the sewer pump conversation. We have
gonna be
Shireen
so
Terrell and Dennis Villano. I know it's late. I appreciate you guys coming out. This is a particular priority of mine. This is the CS for All curriculum and furniture. CS for All stands for Computer Science for All. And I think Shireen, again, Dennis, you know well, is our Director of Technology Integration. Shireen Terrell. Shireen is a high school computer science teacher. She came to us 2 years ago. I think Shireen and I met in terms of the work on the MassCAN committee, which was the Massachusetts Computer Attainment Network. Shireen is not a teacher by, she's a career changer. And I think her pathway highlights that the need for getting more teachers with a computer science background. She can sort of speak to her background as she goes. She was teaching part-time last year, and this year Shireen is a full-time employee. She's teaching 3 sections of high school computer science, but for the other part of her schedule, she's really acting as an industry liaison for us. She's increasing the number of internships and the number of opportunities our students have to learn out there. Again, both are involved in the CS for All movement in Massachusetts. And I think both Dennis and Shireen are both working independently on grants. So again, this is going to be again, an important new area that we have to train students. And I can't stress enough that we have to rethink a lot of what we've done typically, because the world is changing very quickly. I keep reminding you all that the incoming kindergarten class is the class of 2032, and what we're hearing is 40–50% of the opportunities, the jobs that our graduates in 2030 are going to be experiencing aren't even around right now. So again, I just think we have to rethink what we're doing. With that, Dennis, I'll turn it over to you. We can mention sort of some of our activity today at Memorial if you want, but I'll let you go through. Mrs. Monaco, I'm a little bit behind schedule. I apologize, but we'll.
So I'll go through this quickly. The sheets that you have are kind of the overview of where everything is going. Shireen and I get to that. Really, I want to be clear about one thing. We're talking about computer science. We've done a great job in Burlington with digital literacy. Our students are learning in a one-to-one learning environment. Computer science is a little bit beyond that, and the focus traditionally had been on high school. This project is focusing computer science K-12, so for all students, and specifically to introduce 3 courses, grades 6, 7, and 8, so that every middle schooler in Burlington, so every student in Burlington Public Schools will get 3 years of computer science education, which would really put us ahead of most districts in Massachusetts with this. So a little bit of an overview. We are a Computer Science for All consortium member. We're one of the earlier districts that became part of a national movement dedicating that we were going to focus on computer science education for all. And again, not to go through every slide here, some of this comes from old presentations that we've kind of worked together, and a little bit from code.org, which I'll get to in a minute. But this is a focus on computer science skills. Computer science and industry and jobs and work and career of jobs that are coming out now and that will be coming out in the future, as Dr. Conti said. This is not necessarily the one-to-one learning environment or digital literacy skills. Things like algorithms, statistics, building apps, robotics, those are the things that we're talking about, skills that we're talking about that maybe weren't within the one-to-one movement.
And yeah, I just wanted to, this is too loud, I just wanted to build on that and really hearing what all the other presenters have talked about, and it's been great to actually be here and hear how much care and attention is devoted to really taking care of these kids. I mean, it's wonderful. And so this is really an extension of that. And when we're talking about computer science, unless we're in the classroom or doing it, I think it's easy to have a misconception. And what I've learned about computer science is that it truly is foundational. It's a way that we can communicate with each other, collaborate, take risks, fail. It's about creating something using a different tool. I mean, we know how to write, we know how to create using writing, and this is really creating using technology. And it's exciting to see what the kids can do, and I think what's really important is it gives kids a chance to fail. It gives them a chance to experiment. And really, I see the kids in my class, I've got the high achievers, and they can go as far as they want. And then I've got the kids that may be in my class who aren't doing that well in other classes. I had one student whose, parents have tutors for him, and he's doing, he's getting by, and he's in my class, and he actually turned and helped his classmate the other day with one of the pieces of code, and I was just like, so moved, just to see like that success. And so, you know, I feel like computer science, it's really about how do we help our kids grow, and how do we help them learn to learn and apply technology to solving problems. So I think it cuts across everything.
So in the background for some of this, Dr. Conti's obviously been a leader in this. We're lucky to have a superintendent who's been so out front of this with the Mass Superintendents Association. This is some statistics. I'll just run through this quickly. There's 500,000 current job openings that have to do with computing in the United States. It's the fastest growing area of wages for the job market. And of the STEM jobs, so STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math, 71% of all new jobs in STEM are computing. However, only about 8% of the graduates are in computer science. So there's a huge gap here. There's a gap between participants, and there's a gap in gender participants as well. So we're going to talk just briefly about how important that is in our focus, getting more students involved, but also getting more female students involved.
And Dennis, just early studies are getting to the kids in K-12 is critical because they're 6 times more likely to take a computer science course in college if they've had exposure to computer science before leaving high school.
Right. So a quick comparison of financial, and this is not necessarily what we're focused on here, but we want to provide our students with the best opportunities that they possibly can when they go into their careers. This shows that lifetime earnings of a college graduate, and at the end it shows lifetime earnings of a computer science major. And these are jobs that are going to pay. These are jobs that are going to provide a good resource for our kids when they go into the workforce. This is really what I wanted to focus on. Massachusetts, as of March 2019, I just went and got this data for a grant proposal. There's just over 25,000 open computing jobs in this state. Over the next 7 or 8 years, that's expected to go up, depending on which job it is, whether it's a data scientist or a programmer, between 12 and 36% growth in those jobs in the next 7 to 8 years. So as our students go through middle and high school and on to college, there is a need for this, and we need to help meet that need for our students. One of the things that Dr. Conti has mentioned many times is we're looking at jobs of the future, but I tried with the kids today. We were at 4th grade, Ms. Harlow's class, and we were talking about computer science, and we didn't really want to talk about jobs of the future. We wanted to talk about jobs that really are out there now, things that they should be looking at now. And one of the things that Dr. Conti mentioned was a 3D printer that's 3D printing houses. The kids, I know the student's name, but he asked about 10 questions about the fact you can really 3D print a whole house, and you can really 3D print this all at once, and how does it work? And he was extremely interested. This video shows a little bit about how that works, and they 3D print the components of the exterior of the house. It's about $4,000 for materials, $10,000 in total cost, and I think they did this house, although it's small, in 1 day. So these are jobs that are going to be programming and working with these machines and these robots, where the skilled laborers still need to be part of this, but they obviously need to have some new skills that maybe they haven't been prepared for in the past.
There's a famous short clip too, if you want to search on YouTube. It's too late for it. They show a bricklaying robot. So this just isn't about, you have to get this idea, and Janice will get to in a minute, that we're not talking about sitting in a cubicle sort of banging on a keyboard. These are, this literacy is going to, again, as Shireen said, it's a new literacy. It's just going to be a foundational skill for all kids to have. Whether you're a bricklayer, whether you're a truck driver, you're going to be interacting with some sort of mechanized, algorithmic producing robot, or whatever you want to call it. You're going to be interacting with those devices. If you're just a user of that device, you're going to have sort of one level of opportunity. But I think if you understand how that device works, you're going to have a whole other set of opportunities open to you. And we really need to change what we're doing. Another example I use, and then I promise I'll shut up, is the Broad Institute Life Science, world-renowned Life Science Center in Kendall Square, I think I've told you before, hires more computer scientists than biologists now. So I'm just saying that's the modeling that's taking place in life sciences and everywhere. It's a skill set it's a new skill set, a new knowledge that we have to change what we're doing. So a Boston company that does the robots.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, it's really struck me and also the kids in my class that it's here now. We're late. We're behind. One of the classes, computer science principles, the kids actually have to research a computing innovation and write about the harmful effects to society and the good effects. And so they're really starting to think about technology. And they always like look at me in amazement and they're like, you know, AI is here. Facial recognition is here. I don't know if anyone saw the 60 Minutes where in China you can identify somebody from a camera and you can tell who it is. You know, robotics is here, biometrics is here, big data, it's here, and cybersecurity. I mean, the threat, and then the other piece of it is helping kids realize that the information we see can be manipulated. So it's so important for our kids to know how to manage in this world. And so this is really, I mean, I feel like it's serious. It's a crisis if we don't address it.
So one of the things that's come up quite a bit in this, I've done this activity several times with our team and some teachers. I've gone to do a Google search live, and I've Google searched right in front of them what a computer scientist, for a computer scientist. What's an image of a computer scientist? Frankly, a lot of times the pictures look like me. So these are some examples of ones I found today in my Google search. We're trying to work on changing that image a little bit so that we can get more students interested and more female students interested. Dr. Conti asked the fourth graders today to close their eyes and imagine what a computer scientist is. Many of them said that they had glasses. Many of them said that they all said men. Not one actually said female, which was disappointing. Lab coats, most of them wear lab coats and do things secretly that you don't really know about. So the image, I think, is a little off, and we need to work on that, because for us to get these students involved and female students involved, we need to help support that. 60 Minutes last night did a major story on closing the gender gap, so it was a timely piece that they did this last night. If you want to check this out, please do. It's about 12 minutes. It's on CBSnews.com. But some of the highlights of that were that right now only 25% of the computing jobs are with women in the country, nationally. When female participants do go out into the workforce, they're often recruited, the story said, as if they were athletic superstars. They're recruited so heavily because they're in such demand. They also talked about something that we've talked about as a district, that the focus now needs to be on elementary school. Getting this started early, getting these resources that the students can explore from an early age. Focusing on fun and creativity with the hope that we can get hopefully more girls involved in this as they go on into high school. And one major thing that we've noticed within our own district is this term that they use called the middle school cliff, which is where we see a lot of our female students interested in this in elementary. But around 7th grade, they fall off a cliff of interest. It changes. They're no longer interested in computer science moving forward. Now, I don't think Shireen and I and our team members are going to be able to solve this for the whole country or the world, but we need to focus on that. That needs to be something that we pay a lot of attention to work on ways that we can do better to get more females involved and get the girls involved beyond middle school as they go to high school. Finally, the teachers, the need for CS teachers. So a statistic from the 60 Minutes piece yesterday was that 24,000 STEM teachers were graduated in the country last year. 75 were computer science teachers. So 24,000 teachers graduated in science, technology, engineering, and math. Most of them became math or science teachers. 75 went directly into computer science education. That's also something I feel that we have some responsibility for, and something Shireen's done quite a bit of outreach with folks to try to get more involved.
Yeah, we're looking at how we can do more teacher training and expand our bench. And actually one creative solution, we started a new course called Creative Business Tech. So I'm co-teaching that with the business teacher, and we're introducing all the business kids to how to develop an app. It's like I say, we're putting the vegetables in the brownies. They don't even know they're doing this, but that's one way, is like kind of the co-teaching and trying to really expand the breadth of knowledge here at BHS.
So the sheets that I handed out just kind of give the overview of the pathway that we're building. We're building a pathway from elementary to middle school to high school that hopefully will lead them into the actual innovative pathway program, which is an internship and a capstone project as high school students. So this is a K-12 project. The focus tonight is really talking a lot about the middle school level and introducing something where we hope to develop the 3 courses. We're working with the new principal at the middle school and Josh Murphy, and looking at ways to have these be actual full courses for grades 6, 7, and 8 to experience computer science education so that every student gets to experience it. It wouldn't be an elective base. This would be something that they would all experience at the middle school, and we hope to keep them interested so that they go on to the high school level. And the college career pathways that Shireen has been working very closely with is developing some grant opportunities for professional development and to develop teachers to lead this in the schools in Massachusetts. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just briefly. So the state, as you can see, a lot of branches of the state are coming together to really look at how do we prepare kids for in-demand careers. And of course, computer science is one of them. Through this, we're able to bring together our guidance department, which plays a critical role. And actually, they've been able to access a lot of free training to improve the kind of career guidance and support that they can give students, which has been wonderful. And then the other part of this is to really put together a more comprehensive pathway for students. And what we're trying to do is, it's not just computer science, but we're including art and business and statistics and other elements that really go into creating a more full, full portfolio. So this program has been really helpful, and we've also have partnerships with MITRE Corporation. And those engineers come into the school, and they work directly with seniors on projects. We're part of the Amazon Future Engineers program, which has enabled us to get free curriculum, and also our girls in particular, and a lot of the kids are eligible for scholarships of up to $10,000, and we've had a lot of applicants. We're hoping some of the kids get them. We're also working closely with companies like Microsoft and Synopsys, a cybersecurity company down the road. And so this is all really helping to not only teach kids about computer science, but really try to connect them to the possibilities and help them see what they can be.
So ultimately, what we need support with is to make all of this happen. There's many different layers to it. There's devices, there's robotics. The iPads themselves, the devices the students have are a great resource that they already have, but there are other pieces to this that we don't necessarily always have the ability to provide. So we've been doing some of this out of our learning commons, out of our libraries actually. That's why I mentioned it earlier. Things that are small peripheral robots, some of the drones, some of those things have come from there. There's been some BEF grants that have supported some of these over the past couple of years. But ultimately, to introduce this as a fully course curriculum for 3 grade levels at the middle school, and then to continue the pathway to high school, we need to develop some budget support to make that happen. And that will take care of devices. It will take care of several spaces at the middle school and the high school. Shireen's lab is one of them. Leroy Wong, who's been a major part of this at the high school, the help desk program has been one of the major pieces in the capstone project in the internship. So we're looking to support this and jumpstart the Computer Science for All initiative that will ultimately get us on track to educate every student in the district.
And I just want to say one thing. I mean, we have some students who have done some amazing things, but we're talking about reaching more students. And I wish you could see my classroom. I have wonderful kids, but I have 22 boys. And in another class, I have almost all boys and a few girls. And we have, of the female population in the high school, only about 4% are taking computer science. And so what Dennis is saying about reaching students in middle school, it's really critical. I mean, if we're doing a disservice to these girls and to our whole population if we're not introducing them to the types of skills and knowledge that they're going to need to be successful. So the middle school piece is really critical.
So, again, I just want to make sure we get back to the warrant article. The $200,000 that's in the warrant is for some equipment and some sort of curricular materials that are needed. The training and staffing and all that other stuff is going to be in the operating budget as we move forward. But this is going to be a jumpstart for sort of capital materials to create spaces where this work needs to take place, because the classrooms look different than traditional classrooms. They almost look more like industrial spaces, like garages. The kids need to create, they need to build, they need to fail. And so we need to equip spaces where this teaching can take place. Is that, I just don't want to miss.
Yeah, and there's curriculum units that we're looking at for each grade. Again, focus 6th, 7th, and 8th for this. There's units on programming, there's units on robotics, there's units on, what else do AR and VR, which is augmented reality and virtual reality. And these things aren't just, they're not app-based, there's hands-on materials and devices that we need to get this started, to provide those courses with the type of resources they need.
And again, it makes no sense for us not to take advantage from where we are located geographically. We are in the tech hub of the city that does this, and for us not to give our kids every advantage to get exposed and to have some proficiency in this area, I just think it's a mistake. So I just think we need to do this, and we need to do it. The time is now for this type of investment. We have to make other policy changes at the state level. We're trying to. Again, we asked math used to be an elective. They finally allowed computers. We're working on some other changes at the state, actually count towards a high school diploma, because it doesn't. And I heard this from someone else. We're not going to discover this is how we are going to, if that was driving our economy. So I'm not dismissing the states that for us, again, I have to rethink how to do the sewer pump. But classroom spaces that we need that look very different, and equipment that we need that looks very different, so that every middle schooler has this experience, and we're going to create that demand then and the need for more sections at high school. So I think that's what we're gonna need to do. And again, I can't tell you how much work Shireen, Dennis, Leroy, you mentioned, our Josh, our middle school team, Carrie. They put a tremendous amount of time in this. They're writing grants whenever possible, so this is not something they're just looking for locally. Shireen, you've been successful with your Pathways grant. Dennis, you're working on, I forget the name of the grant you told me?
Skills Capital Grant. So the Skills Capital Grant would be for, it's only for equipment-based purchases.
And again, cybersecurity we mentioned. We have a huge cybersecurity space at the Costa Center at Northeastern in Burlington. It's just, we have to take advantage of where we are. We need to have our kids learning in different places. And so I also want to, again, thank Shireen. A part of her responsibility is to act as a liaison with companies in the area, and she's done a remarkable job. She's coordinated 2 superintendent field trips, one to Amazon Robotics. Did we get our middle school kids to Amazon Robotics?
Yes, we had a date and we're rescheduling because there's some kind of test thing.
But I'm saying the middle school robotics team that presented to you all are going to go to Amazon Robotics through Shireen's contacts. And then we took a group of superintendents to the Microsoft Garage, which is a learning space that Microsoft has created in Kendall Square. So again, I think that outreach is critical. And companies are so invested in this because they don't have workers to fill the jobs that they have. And so, and I just think there's not enough. Again, they need all kids to have this background, not just 2 or 3% or 4% of kids who gravitate towards this as a personal interest or naturally. So again, this is obviously a passion of mine. It's a warrant article that I think is just critical for us to move forward as a school district.
Sounds great.
Along with our sewer pumps.
I just have one, I think it's fabulous that we're moving forward with this, that I think it's an important thing for us to be doing. I really appreciate all that you're doing. And I especially appreciate your addressing the gender gap. I think it's a really important focus. And I'm just wondering if you are also looking at any other racial or ethnic kind of gaps. I'm guessing that there's similar percentages, but maybe not. Please tell us how that's going.
Actually, part of the grant that we're applying for is to be able to do a focused outreach effort, for one, and then also to make sure that we can provide non-traditional computer science students with the support they need to take the courses and succeed, and also take college-level courses. So the whole goal is to really make this more inclusive. And so it's a focused strategic effort that we're embarking on. And what's been good is really at the table are so many different people, including guidance, and guidance is there, and student support services, and ELL, and computer science teachers, and so it's been a good broad-based effort. And yeah, I've been surprised. It really takes a focused effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Murphy?
I would also speak in favor of it, anticipating maybe a question from Ways and Means. At some point, we'll get some sort of a breakdown as to what we're buying with the 200,000.
Yes.
So we have, okay.
We have that all background. We have, again, that wasn't appointed tonight, but you'll get that now as a follow-up. I just thought if you saw CS for All, it wouldn't make any sense.
Mrs. Monaco?
I don't know why I'm telling you this, but back when I have 3 girls and a boy. When my 3 girls went through Burlington High School, you may never have heard of John Nolan or Ani Strickman. I know you've heard of Mike Pace. They were computer science teachers, and they were fabulous. John Nolan, he should have gotten a crown. I mean, he was wonderful. And all 3 of my girls started their careers in computer science as a result of what they learned in Burlington High School.
Wow, that's awesome.
By the time my son went through, it was a little later, things had changed, and it just, he didn't do that. So there was somewhat of an ebb and flow, at least in the high school. I always felt terrible that he didn't get the same quality of instruction in computer science that my girls had gotten. And yet there wasn't anything I could do about it except complain, and nobody ever listens. So,
But you can see what an impact that made. I mean, just,
huge. I mean,
yeah.
we're talking 3 girls.
Like life direction shaping.
Right. I mean, they didn't stay in it. One's in special ed as a, and another one's a doctor, but they started out in computer science, and it's because of what they learned here. And it's girls.
That's great.
So, this to me is a no-brainer. I mean, come on, let's get with it. Let's have the best computer science that we can possibly have. And of course you start it at the lower levels. I mean, I have a 2-year-old grandson that just takes my iPad and turns on YouTube and picks his show. So, it's natural to them, and I am totally all for this. Thank you for a nice presentation. And I hope you didn't mind the history lesson.
No, it's helpful.
Mr. Nelson?
Just a quick question, because it might come up, I think, on town meeting floor. Eric, what are the staffing implications once we invest this money in the infrastructure?
I think, Mr. Nelson, again, Dennis can help me with some of this. I think we're really trying to retrain a lot of the staff that we have and teach them some new skills. I think at the high school level, what we're finding is there are great courses like Exploring Computer Science that actually transcend different departments. So again, Shireen, you mentioned that we have a social studies teacher that's interested in being trained in how to teach the course, because it's about big data, it's about how to use information. The gerrymandering that we've all experienced is happening because of algorithms that sort of occur. How information can be sort of shifted and changed. It's a social science as well. So I think we're hoping to expand the teachers who are trained to teach this information. I also think ultimately, though, I want to be honest, is I think we're hopefully going to create more demand for more high-level computer science courses. And so we'll certainly have to, again, retrain or hire additional computer science teachers in the next, I'm hoping, 4 to 5 years, as we have more middle schoolers who have this literacy, coming forward. I think the traditional math sequencing and I think the traditional science sequencing is going to have to change.
I was going to say, I still think investing in teacher training, and it's a small amount of money for what you yield. Very small. And then the other thing is, there are options like working in partnership with colleges to provide some more advanced coursework. So I think the staffing implications it's finding people more than it's going to be a huge budget breaker.
And for the middle school, initially, you wouldn't be looking at anything additional. We have 2 technology engineering courses and a computer course that has the middle school already, 3 teachers that provide those courses. This is to update those courses and to make them computer science driven for the future. It's not anything additional or new there.
Thank you, I think it's a great idea.
And again, this is not teaching Microsoft Office. This isn't teaching a tool. This is teaching actually the algorithms that go into sort of making the tools work. So it's a
Try to explain it, Eric, go ahead.
It's a different, I can't, I don't do it, but I'm saying I can't, it's just, I think some people are calling computer science coursework something that's just not computer science.
Mrs. Creed?
I don't understand if this is gonna be added in as mandatory for the middle school, what class is this replacing? Because if I remember correctly, kids are like really scheduled very tight, so what are you replacing?
So they're currently going through looking at a new schedule. And the new scheduling, I don't have those details. It's not necessarily, I'm talking to them, we're talking with them, but we're not the ones necessarily developing that. But currently at the middle school, you have 2 technology engineering teachers and a computer teacher. The courses that they provide would be updated. And those curriculums would be updated to be computer science driven. They would still touch on engineering, they would still touch on computer science skills like discoveries, and they would even have some things like information technology, robotics, drones, things like that develop more hands-on skills, but they're already in place. So we're revisiting those curriculums, we're updating them, and we're bringing in some new resources for them.
So I still not getting it, because I don't remember any of my 3 kids getting engineering or any of these.
So at the middle
classes.
school right now, we have 2 technology engineering teachers. They teach courses for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. So every student at some point in their 3 years goes through a technology engineering course. Those happen in the, if you know the middle school, they're the old shop class areas at the middle school. They've now doing some work with 3D printing and some robotics in those spaces, but they really were the old shops. And those are downstairs. The computer course itself is Miss O'Leary, and she teaches the course that's up in the PC lab, formerly a PC lab. They now bring their iPads to it upstairs near the media center, near the Learning Commons. So those courses they've been there since as long as I've been in Burlington, but we're updating, looking at updating those.
I mean, I think it's great, I just want to make sure they have the time
Yep.
to fit this in.
And they will, as they work through the drafts of new schedules and updating some of those, we will fit that in. But again, it won't require any additional staff at this point for that. It's already in place.
Great, thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much, appreciate it. It's very informative, lots of great information.
Thank you for coming out. I know it's late. I appreciate it. So, Bob, do you want to quickly go through the rest of the list, and then we can try to wrap up?
Sure. First, I'd have to say that if I'm one of the remaining 18 warrant articles, that I'm probably feeling sad after having to follow those 2 presentations. They're exciting, they're innovative. The rest of these are the boring behind-the-scenes things that we kind of take for granted. These are maintenance problems, these are old age problems, these are braking problems.
And some safety.
Some safety, of course. So like I said, I don't want to go through them quickly, but I'll give a brief overview, and please stop me anytime. MSMS cafeteria tables. This one's a combination of old and safety concerns. These tables weren't replaced during the renovation, but the way that they're lined up, they're actually back-to-back and don't provide enough walk-through space, not only for a fire hazard, but also just to get in and out from dropping off your trash. So they're definitely looking beat up, they're looking old, and they probably should have been replaced when we did the building, but now's a good time to do that.
Again, this is going from long tables to round tables, and there's a lot of research behind it. If you want to read the research on cafeteria tables, we can make it available to you.
Yep, and again, like I said, on all these, I do have some backup backup information that we will share with everyone, but that wasn't the meeting for tonight. This conversation has come up in the past. It says police walkie-talkie, and the reason it says police is that we have met with the police department about this, particularly our 2 safety officers, Keith Shepard and Officer Tom Fournier. And what we're looking at is, typically the schools had walkie-talkie systems in the past, but they were more of the cheaper ones that we'd buy at the local, electronics store. that didn't have the great range. This would be a higher-based, higher-quality digital system, walkie-talkie, that would be on the police radio scanners, which would give us direct connection to the police department in the case of an event. So it is a little bit more expensive than just going to, let's say a Radio Shack and buying a walkie-talkie, but it does offer us a little more flexibility, a lot more programming capabilities, and a lot more interconnection, like I said, with the police department.
It also means an antenna on the wires.
It does. So, I mean, again, in the backup, when I'll talk about, so that would be an antenna being mounted on top of the water tower. That would give us greater range across the whole entire town. So, again, we talked about Project Adventure, the BHS Computer Lab. Same, BHS Computer Lab in the art department here is a Mac lab that uses, like I said, I think there's 21 Macs in there, plus a teacher lab. They're 7 years old. They've been upgraded, and what we've tried to do is replace internal components on that, high drives, memory, and so forth, just to get a few more years out of them. We have 2 labs, and what we've done is rotated, buying a new lab, and then wait a few years and buy another lab. This is that request for that second lab, which is 7 years old. If we move on to the Francis Wyman Library furniture, same argument as the cafeteria tables at the middle school. Old. Do they work? Barely, right? They're broken, they don't create good flow, they don't match, they don't have the right height for the size of the children, they don't have any soft seating. Some of the cabinets and so forth are for different types of sizes of books and so forth, and don't provide us the flexibility for the storage of the materials that we have. The flow in the library is not the best. So this would be not a complete remodel of the whole entire library, but replacing most of the equipment as far as furniture goes in there. A new circulation desk, like I said, for better flow, better teaching spaces. Music band lockers. This is, I don't want to say an ongoing, this is something that happened at the high school about 5 years ago, where we bought some in one of the band rooms, and this would be to buy more for an addition, for a second band room that we have. We have lots of equipment that we invest in year to year, but we don't have all the places to store them. So this would hopefully alleviate some of that by giving us places to put this expensive equipment into when not being used. CS for All, we talked about Pine Glen room renovation. I think I'm going to say this twice. When it comes to Pine Glen and Fox Hill, we are running out of space in both of those 2 buildings. So every square inch that we have, we're looking at. We're looking at ways to renovate rooms, cut rooms in half, add rooms wherever we can, renovate a room to make a teaching space. And that's what this would be right here, is renovating 2 spaces in there. One would be the egg out front, which is an awkward shape, creating that into a more linear space, and creating 2 offices out of 1 space, and then taking a room downstairs, which is a partial storage room, and converting that into, again, not a full classroom, but a teaching space as well, too. The not fun ones are the Fox Hill water pumps and the Pine Glen sewer pumps. Both of those relate to our infrastructure. We need one to move the water around the building. The one for Pine Glen is to get it out of the building. It's really that simple. So both of those are dual chamber systems where they have a high load and a low load, and they fail over each other. So when one goes, if the second one goes, then we either have no water or we have no way to get it out of the building. So that's what the replacement is on that. Francis Wyman air conditioner, as you remember. Did I skip that? I probably did. MSMS boiler replacement. Same, when MS Marshall Simons, before the renovation happened, we actually went out and got 3 boilers, hot water boilers, replaced in the building before the renovation. The renovation was completed in 2012. These were installed in 2010. Last year, we had one of them die, and it was repaired, so it is new right now. Second one died this year. So we have 3 total. They all work in conjunction and load balance against each other. So we have 2 working right now. Of course, if another one died, 1 is not enough to heat the whole entire building. 2 is ideal, 3 load balances. So this would be replacing the 3rd one. That gets us in a good strategy for longevity. That still means that there's 1 left. That's from the original build. That could fail at some point, which is definitely a reason why this is a priority for me. With 1 dead, if the other one that's existing dies, we would not be in a good spot, given, you know, the winter that we're having now and what we would have next year. So let me get back to Francis Wyman Air Conditioning. I think some of you, or most of you, remember last year, we asked for a higher number, and then with conversations with the town, we reduced that number in order to have the town get a piece of equipment. We're calling this Phase 3, and it's really just a third installation of existing or air conditioning inside of that building. Fox Hill room renovation, as I mentioned earlier, again, we have 4 pods. Last year, we added in the pod space wall structure to create small learning environments in 2 existing pods. We're looking to do that again where the pods are open. So instead of just being an open, larger hallway, create those smaller learning spaces as well. So that would be, let me see, make sure I didn't lose my space. Francis Wyman bathrooms. Again, this one you saw last year as well too. Francis Wyman has 8 student bathrooms. We asked for 4 of them last year. This would be to do the remaining 4. As again, in both sides of the wings, there's a boys and girls upstairs, downstairs, left and right. So that's where the 8 bathrooms come from. So 4 are done, and 4 more we'd be looking to replace. Pine Glen interior lighting and ceiling tiles. I'm gonna throw doors in there as well too. This is on the 10-year capital plan, even though the door part's not. Pine Glen, again, one of our older buildings. The lighting and the ceilings in the place are really dim. And obviously we try to maintain them and repair them as much as possible. But this is something that we've been putting off as far as a large project and just trying to maintain it within our budget yearly as pieces fall down. The thing with the doors that's not written here, but I'd like to mention is that a lot of the doors, if not all of them, are existing equipment to the building. So what happens is you see that, you know, we're replacing hinges, we're seeing that the doors are hollow wood, so they're chipping, they're rotting, they're swelling, they're, you know, becoming either off kilter and so forth. And a lot of the exterior doors are starting to see some surface rust and things like that, you know, so we're sanding and painting them and replacing seals on them. Again, with an older building, we expect this. It's just that now we're starting to see a lot more of it. So I think it's definitely something that we need to get on top of it. And like I said, that's in the 10-year capital plan. Memorial and Marshall Simon's interior painting, same 10-year plan. And, you know, we keep thinking that they're new buildings, but one is 2012, one's 2013. And we don't put a ton of money in our operating budget for paint. And sometimes it's not just paint, it's brushes, it's sanding the walls, it's repairing holes, things like that. So it's definitely something that we need to stay on top of. Last year, we didn't put any money in for painting in any of our schools. So again, we try to offset that in our operating budget. But like I said, with those 2 buildings, I think it's time. BHS vinyl flooring. You saw this last year, and you're seeing it again, and you're seeing it a higher dollar value and a higher volume. Because again, as you walk down the 2 big streets, 1 and 2, that's what we call them, the 2 streets that go all the way down to the gym. The surface area on those not only gets a lot of wear and tear, but what we've tried to do is replace, you know, sections of those every single year. It's just that there's more sections than there are years and money, so we're not staying on top of it fast enough. And at the rate of replacing it in 2,000-3,000 square foot sections, we're losing space and time. So we have sections right now that are peeled up that we're putting, you know, tape on and silicone just to try to keep it down. And so we really need to stay on top of that. The last one is due to the conversations that we had here. This is not an exact number, definitely something that we would really have to go out to bid for. Based on conversations that I've had with engineers and obviously previous conversations that the school department or other towns have done on a project of roughly $11 to $14 million. $100,000 for the design and engineering of the BHS HVAC. We know that that's going to need a lot more conversation than just what that's asking for. I think as a committee, we need to decide obviously where we're going to go with that. We're going to hope that obviously we get some MSBA funding, but we also know that we can't wait any longer and that we have to do something. We don't believe it's as simple as just buying a $10 boiler off the street, putting it in downstairs, and all of a sudden our problems are fixed. The size and scope of a, like I said, $12 million, $14 million project, Again, requires full engineering, a company to come in. It's probably somewhere in the 1 to 2 month case study. There's going to be everything from a gas engineering design to a electrical engineering design. So it's a big job, and I can't even guarantee that 100,000 is enough to do it, but just based on, like I said, the research I've done, I feel like that's a safe number. Like I said, I know I tried to rush through those just because it's late at night, but I definitely expect further conversations. I definitely have information that I'll share with the committee, again, Ways and Means, with backup materials and so forth. And again, these are in no priorities. But like I said, there are a few that I think definitely need some attention. So,
Do we have a date from capital budget yet?
March 19th is the requested date.
Mr. Murphy?
Just a question, what's the date of submission for warrant articles?
March 29th.
Okay, so we have to vote before that. Okay.
Yep, so we have 2 more meetings before that.
So again, in the next week or so, you'll start getting backup material for each of the warrant articles. And if you have specific questions, again, please make sure that we get those questions and we'll get answers to them.
Ms. Creedon?
Weren't we doing something, a program with like projectors or something? So,
Yes.
are we missing it for this year, or?
So last year, Nicole, myself, Jose, who's back there, of course, thanks for staying late, Jose. Nicole built it into the existing budget, so we requested, I gotta look at it, but I think it's $190,000. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but what it was to buy the initial 62 projectors for the middle school, and then the installation for the 200 projectors that we would have across the district. Through the operating budget, $50,000 was added, and we bought projectors for Pine Glen, but used the installation money from the warrant article to install them. This year, in the IT budget, there's a line item for $50,000 for projectors, which we'll use to buy the projectors, but then use the remaining warrant article money in order for the installation. So there's nothing missing from warrant article.
Just wanted to be sure.
Okay.
I thought we paid for the installation, but I wanted to make sure we got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, so over the next 2 meetings, we'll have more information and look for a vote. Thank you. All right.
Okay, Madam Chair, turn over
Last but
Nicole.
not least.
So, you all received the financial update for this month. I guess I'll walk through page by page. So first, on page 1, we have the revolving fund summary. And the two, I think, that we've primarily been focusing in on was the school lunch and the Sprouts daycare center accounts. You can see that the Sprouts daycare is no longer in a deficit. We actually did adjust rates recently to sort of build in sort of a cushion instead of having to depend on that the timing difference of the revenue to see how healthy that account is. And then for school lunch, we're at 19,647. In last month, that was at around 16,000. So relatively stable on that. Then for pages 2 and 3, have the operating budget year-to-date. Page 4, the accommodated year-to-date. And then on 5 and 6, we have the projections for operating, which last month was 149, 185 for the total for operating for the anticipated current surplus. And you can see now it's up to 134, 165, so about 15,000. One of the main reasons for that was on line 18, the teacher attendance. Last month, it was at 79,480, and now it's down to 64,700, so about a $15,000 decrease there. And again, that's the teachers being absent, and not getting the sick and the incentive for the number of days. And then on
What page is that one on again? The
page 5.
5? Okay.
And then on page 7, we have the accommodated projected, which you can see is up from last month. It was at $158. The reason that it is now at 105, 748 is we had a out-of-district placement that we were notified is now a cost share with the state. So we were able to liquidate a portion of that purchase order for that tuition.
That's good.
Questions? Oh, Mr. Eiler and then Ms. Sickler. Sorry.
Hi, I should remember this from last time, but I forgot. What, on the revolving accounts, what does received but not yet posted mean? How is that different than regular receipts?
So, for instance, for school lunch, the received but not yet posted, I can see that, like, the state comptroller has issued the payment for the reimbursement for that month, but it just hasn't been posted to our books yet.
So it checks in the mail then?
Yes.
Something like that.
Is that, okay. Ms. Sickler?
Good evening. Eileen Sickler, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. Let's see. So I'm on page 2, excuse me, line 27, the tutors. So it looks like we incurred 180 through 1/7. And now we're, and now we're at 360. So that's a change of 180 approximately, or 90 a month. So I guess the question is the remaining budget of 140 enough for the next few months?
So for tutors, we have obviously some employees that are grant funded, and we ended up switching who was being paid from the grant from between tutors and teachers. So that's the change that you're seeing there.
You know, and I'm sorry, Nicole, that's right, you mentioned this at the meeting the other night, and I wasn't quite clear on it then. Could you just go over that again? How that works, the grants, and how it affects this number?
So if we had teachers that were previously, tutors that were previously funded via a grant, and now we have teachers that are funded from the grant instead, it just offsets.
Okay, I think. So I guess my question is, though, is the balance, is that going to be enough for the next few months? I mean, until the end of the school year, the 140?
Yes, we'll have sufficient funds in our budgeted salaries to.
Okay,
to cover that.
all right. That's good. Line 29, the Evening Academy, and I'm not sure what the Evening Academy is, I guess, first.
Ms. Sickler, the Evening Academy is our alternative high school program, and so it meets 4 nights a week from 6:30 to 9:30 typically. And those are students who, for whatever reason, are typically graduation eligible, so they've passed all their state tests.
Okay.
But high school, sometimes they have to work, they have to maintain a full-time job to have
Okay,
access to the
okay.
evening academy.
Okay.
So it would be a limited number of kids who
Yeah.
earn their high school diplomas in a different way.
Okay, super. So through 1/7, it was 70,000, and now it's 23. So that's a flip of about 50,000, going the other way. That is, it's reduced. It's a lesser amount now than it was 2 months ago, actually, incurred. Yes, question, so how come?
There was a salary that was incorrectly being charged to that account.
Okay, so it's just a reclass?
Yep.
Okay. What was the other side to it? Was it
I'd have to look.
Okay, all right.
Hold off the top of my head.
Line 64, the sped accounting. It was 370 through 17, and now it's down to 290, a decrease of 80.
So again, this has to do with the grants where we had expenses that were previously funded through operating, and we've swapped. So between the tutors and then the teachers and expenses, it was just a shift in.
So
in
is
our
that,
budgets
is
for
that
grants.
grant thing, is that sort of, as we think about, as sort of off-balance sheet, that is, it's, the numbers aren't here per se? In other words, is there a separate schedule that says, here's our grant money coming in, and here are the expenses against it?
So
I assume-
how's the grant recorded?
Yeah, I mean, where is that, is that ever displayed anywhere, presented? In other words, do we get $10 in grants, do we get 100,000, and then where does that money go?
Again, our biggest grant, we said, is typically, if we're talking about entitlement grants, is for special education. So I'm not sure what that runs. Is that 600,000 typically? I'm just trying to remember. Something like that. So we are getting that grant, and then, again, it's for particular services that we have to provide, and some staffing is included in that. So it doesn't show up in the operating budget, so, and the amounts change every year, so who we assign to the grant may change every year as well, because we can't overexpend the grant either, so I think if you're asking, I think the grants managed out of the special ed office, we can certainly provide a summary of the total grant amount if you want to see that and what we spend it for. Again, I think that would be relatively simple to put together.
That would be worthwhile. I mean, I didn't realize that there were monies sort of being run in and out of that. I mean, that's what it seems like here, what you just said. Or
So
being reclassed or something, I don't know what the right word is.
it was basically just like an amendment to the original budget of the grant. That's all.
Yeah, I've just never known that there were grants. I mean, I know we talked about them the other night, but I didn't know if there was a separate schedule that says, oh, by the way, here's the operating budget, and then here's a separate accounting for all the grants, ins and outs.
So that's how we typically get our federal dollars, is through
Okay.
what they call a grant. It's an entitlement. So they would say, again, we want you to provide services for this type of student, and they provide limited number of dollars for that, for us to spend it on. So there's lots of rules, but we can certainly show what we're receiving. We receive a relatively small amount of federal dollars, given the community's fiscal standing
Right.
and everything else.
Right. Well, it might be worthwhile for a town meeting, too, just, let's see.
Miss,
I just
Oh,
wanted to add to that, sorry.
Okay.
So every year in the past, we always did get a list of the grants and the funds for. So it is something that the subcommittee at Ways and Means does
Okay.
review and look into it. So they do have to give us a list of that,
Okay, all right,
just so you know.
new to me, but, okay. And so, line 34. So, 135 now, so it looks like there's a deficit, and I know the last time I was here, what was it, was it a month or two ago? and we talked about this, and you didn't think it was going to be an issue. So now there's a 15K deficit, and that's the, I was going to say software. It's system-wide maintenance, custodian, vacation leave, I guess why. So now there's a deficit.
How do we plan to maintain this?
So that, it's just, there was, I think some custodians that had lots of vacation time and they've been using it. So basically.
It's overdrawn, right? It was just more than.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the question is, how are we going to?
Well, no. Last time I was here, Nicole didn't think it was going to be a problem. And so now my question is, well, now it's overdrawn.
Right.
And so is there going to be a problem, even more so than this?
Our total budget's not overdrawn, so no.
Not in the bottom line right now.
Okay.
So we'll look at the end of the
Yep.
year, and then we'll make an adjustment to the budget if we need to do that.
Perfect.
I think we had a custodian recently retire mid-year, and
Sure.
I think there were some implications with that.
Yeah.
But again, we'll watch that line closely at the end of the year, but the bottom line is still, again, looking okay.
Yes. Okay, all right, thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Simon?
So when we look at, I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly again. So I think on page 6, where it says total requested budget, 134,165. So I wanted to know, is that our leeway for the rest of the year? Or do I understand that correctly?
Yes.
And last month, it was about the same. So we're relatively close, so,
Yep, just about 15,000 over the prior month.
yeah. So I'm interested in your take on that, Dr. Conti.
That's never enough, so,
Okay.
again, we're in a budget freeze right now. We're really trying to watch our costs closely for the last, where are we, March, last 4 months, 3.5 months. So, hopefully nothing unexpected happens and we can get through, and then we'll examine the level of detail, once we get through. And, so that's where we're at. Where should we be now? Again, I'd like $500,000, but I'm saying I don't, but.
Okay.
Mrs. Monco?
Nicole, on the, now, I'm not an accountant, okay, so don't laugh. On the spent and encumbered, does the encumbered mean what you expect to spend for the rest of the year?
So encumbered means that a purchase was authorized and a purchase order was released for that, but we haven't received the invoice yet to pay.
Okay, so,
But it is an outstanding liability that we're sure of.
okay, so but it's not like, if you look at salaries, have you encumbered salaries for the whole year or not?
Currently, we don't encumber salaries in Munis, but that's something, a project on my to-do list, once I'm able to get to my to-do list.
All right, so let me rephrase my question. The remaining budget column, is that expected to get all chewed up, the whole thing, by the end of the year? Because it's not, because these things have not been encumbered, and therefore we've got months to go that eat into that amount?
So that's why we have the separate, the projection. So we have the year-to-date, so everyone can see sort of what has been
Okay,
expended to date.
Which page is the projection?
The projection for operating starts on page 5.
So the current anticipated surplus or deficit is what you expect July 1?
As of today, yes.
Okay, so it does count the expected costs from now until then?
Correct.
Okay. So that's what I was looking for, but I was looking in the wrong place. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
Just wanted to, Nicole had circulated a letter from the auditor, I believe. We had this discussion, I think it was last time, John, about the negative balances in a revolving account. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but what he said was it's an end-of-the-year balance. The statute does not require it to be a positive from A to Z. It just has to be positive at Z.
He didn't really say.
And did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's encouraging, and that makes a lot of sense. The, I guess the question then becomes, what's the definition of end of year? I know it sounds.
Fiscal.
I know it sounds silly, but at the end of the fiscal year, we're also negative then because we haven't gotten our final reimbursement, is my understanding. So, for instance, when we look at the.
Federal or state fiscal year?
Our fiscal year. Well, at any rate, I guess that's the question is where do we want to put the line to stand? If we look at the revolving account starting balances, they were negative then, which was the end of our last fiscal year. So that's a bad break point because we haven't received all our reimbursements yet. So I guess the question is what date do we want to choose?
So again, I'm sorry to jump in, Mr. Murphy, but I think the agreement, and we can certainly change the agreement if you want, was food services, and I think it came about because of a deficit that had been allowed to accumulate, was before we sort of start the next fiscal year's operating budget, that Nicole would work out with sort of the town to zero out the cafeteria, the revolving account in the cafeteria. So I'm not exactly sure when that occurs, if it's sometime during the summer. Typically, it's been after we've received all of our revenue for that year. And let's just say we end up with a $10,000 deficit after we've received everything. The agreement is we would zero out that $10,000 deficit before starting the next fiscal year. So whenever that break is, I would say is when we're turning over the cafeteria account is when we've said there wouldn't be a negative balance.
Okay, so our goal at all the revolving accounts, presumably, because Sprouts would be the other one, is that sometime in the summer when we think we've received everything is when it should be zero or above.
And again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think Nicole's been working closely with Donna Sullivan and adjusted the rates. So I don't believe you're going to be seeing a negative in the Sprouts account moving forward. So it's really going to just be the cafeteria. I don't want to misspeak there, but is that correct? I think it's just going to be the cafeteria that is going to, we're going to have to worry about moving forward. So we're trying to get the Sprouts account where we don't have to worry about receiving the additional funding.
That's great.
To close that.
Any other questions, comments on financial? Mr. Kuna?
Sorry, just one last thing I forgot to bring up, I wanted to at least touch base before we go to our next meeting, is community custodial. I have that as well. Right now, there is no increase in hours, but the average cost has changed just due to not only the employees that we have, but also the contract that we have in place with the custodians. So there is about a $1,700 increase from last year's to this year's. So I guess at some point, I don't know if the committee has heard anything from outside parties, if we're looking to increase that, maintain the level of services. Again, that would be an ongoing conversation as well, too. Thanks.
Ms. Smonko?
Have the hours all been used?
Depending on the group. So not all hours have been used from that, but definitely some groups have reached their hours. Typical groups like BYBA and youth soccer and so forth hit their numbers really quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other participants,
So what do you
spread it out
do
throughout
if
the
there's
whole year.
hours left late in the game?
Hours left for who? I'm sorry, just any particular group?
Yeah, I mean, do you spread them around if they're left over?
No, we would adjust them. So last year, what we did is we adjust them based on the usage and so forth, so that way we don't end up with zeros. And we try to have as least possible many people saying that, it's been one day and I ran out of money and ran out of time, and now every time I come, I'm going to get a bill for it. So those are the ones that we looked to increase last year. Like I said, the ones that we increased last year, I think that we could increase by a factor of 10, and then they would still end up getting a bill. So like I said, I think it's really just a conversation that whether or not the committee wants to weigh in by either adding hours to those groups. There are definitely groups that I can give you that I would recommend not adding hours to because they don't use them in a timely fashion. But there are definitely groups that even though they aren't complaining per se, but could benefit from more hours.
All right, why don't you give us a recommendation on that when
Okay.
you get to it?
Any other
Madam Chair, I
questions?
move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second, all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, abstained, 500. Meeting is closed. Thank you very much.